All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the ANF Budget Workshop. I hope you have your coffee and your drinks ready. Drinks meaning just water. Sorry. For this meeting for April 30th, 2025. We have one board member who's remote, and they meet the requirement of posting the agenda at their remote location. And as we discuss the items on the agenda today, I'll be calling on directors who raise hands to speak. Please limit your comments to matters not already addressed. State all your points when you do have a chance to speak so we can move through our agenda as quickly as possible. Nicole, can you please call the roll?
Chair Abdullahi.
Present.
Vice Chair Rant.
Yes, here.
Vice Chair Yamani. Vice Chair Yamani. Directors Boyd, Hodgson, Croucher,
Here?
Fless,
Here.
Hilliker, Leahy,
Here.
Norman,
Here.
Quaylen, Ray,
Here.
Serrano, Vespi, Whitburn. Make sure we need one more.
One more. All right. Director Flessy, you want to join our?
One,
All right.
So we still need one?
one more.
Who's not part of the committee? That's
Yamani was on, but
who in the audience is not part of the committee? Let's ask for your help.
All right. Director Freehoff.
Oh, no, they're here.
Oh, they're here?
Yeah.
All right.
Here.
Okay. We'll take a second. All right. Maybe we can do some breathing exercises while we wait. Right. No, breathing does help.
Imani was on, but she fell off.
Oh, she fell off. Okay.
All right, next here. So,
Next here.
hello.
All right. Do we have quorum?
Serrano,
Here.
Chair Abdullahi, you have a quorum of the committee.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I do not have any additions to the agenda at this time. I'd like to ask if there are any members of the public wishing to comment on any items listed on the ANF Special Board Committee agenda.
If there are public speakers in the Zoom waiting room, please raise your hand through the Zoom app or press star 9 if you are listening by phone. We have one. Caller, you have 3 minutes for your comments, and you can begin now.
Hello, good morning. Just checking. Can you hear me well, or do you need me to change the audio? Hello?
We can hear you. You have 3 minutes. You can start now.
Okay, I just have an update with you. Is this better?
Is this better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, fantastic. Just checking. Good morning, Marco Espinoza. In yesterday's discussion, there was a gentleman who was talking about basically the batteries that need to be placed. You know, people don't want them next to their house, et cetera, et cetera. One of the ideas that I had, you don't have to put a lot of them necessarily, but where the sort of like local power stations are at, you know, big old metal things that are all fenced off. Even if you just put like a few on that piece of land, I mean, it's clearly already all electrical. It doesn't have to be, you know, a lot, just to keep things sort of running in case of, you know, sort of like a small blackout. I think we all might have heard of what happened yesterday. But also, I remember we all experienced it, if those who lived here, during the early 2010s blackout. So it's a way to, you know, not be so concerned about finding a single giant plot of land to put all of them all in one place. We have little pieces of land here and there. That was one of my ideas. Sorry about the background noise. I'm getting off of the bus right now. And then that's all I have for now. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to more of these meetings because it's such an important topic that we have as a community. Water. So thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comments. All right, we are going to move to the information item, the consideration of the general manager's draft recommended budget for fiscal years 2026 and 2027. Few comments. The draft recommended budget was presented to the board last month at the A&F committee on Thursday, April 24th, 2025. At that time, an overview of the budget was provided, and the board was informed about this week's workshop. And as a reminder, the board will be taking action on the budget at the June 26th board meeting. And upon conclusion of these 2 days of workshops, all board comments received will be incorporated in the May budget and the May rates and charges. So please provide staff with any specific directions of additional comments and suggestions no later than the end of this week. And again, thank you for the directors who are here and present for the workshop. In order to ensure that staff complete each of their presentations, I would like the board to hold questions until the end and the conclusion of each of the presentation. We will be starting today with a follow-up from yesterday, and we're going to turn it over to Nina for this follow-up.
Good morning, and thank you, Chair Abdullahi. So in response to Director Croucher's question regarding the $40 million that was presented to LAFCO and the $22 million reduction to the ESP North County Pump Station roll-up, I have some additional information. So here you can see on the slide what that, about the $40 million, what that consisted of. So those projects, this was back in before 2018. So we had the pump stations as well as some ancillary projects, including a replacement of a flow control facility and some mitigation work. So in 2019, the board directed staff to stop all work on projects associated with Rainbow and Fallbrook. So that work, again, totaled that, it's actually $39 million here on the screen. So after that, we removed the projects circled there. This was the ancillary projects. We removed those from the budget, and that totaled $8.5 million approximately. And so what we have remaining is the pump station work. So what you see in the multi-year plan is a total roll-up cost of $45.5 million. That includes the Valley Center improvements that's currently in construction. So you can see that at $15 million. The request to reduce that roll up by $22 million is based on re-looking at what the costs are to address the detachment. So demolishing a couple flow control facilities, and then we are looking to repurpose 2 flow control facilities for water quality issues. So we looked at those costs and we reduced the amount of that work by $22 million. So that's what that variance is. So in total for the Rainbow and Fallbrook work, it reduces by about $30 million. So we still have about $10 million in the budget to account for the work that needs to occur for the detachment work. And keep in mind that the majority of that work, if not all of it, will be reimbursed by Fallbrook and Rainbow, with the exception, as I mentioned yesterday, about $300,000, which will be Water Authority work to repurpose 2 of the flow control facilities to maintain water quality on the pipelines. That's the last slide I have, so happy to answer any questions.
All right.
Nina, would you please also verbally answer the questions that were asked yesterday about the San Luis Rey Wetland Habitat Restoration Project and the boundaries associated with the project and the mitigation credits?
Yes. So again, there was a question on whether or not the San Luis Rey habitat was within our service area. It is not in our service area because it is located in Rainbow's service area. However, we are able to, we own the property in that area, and that is ideal property for the wetlands habitat that we need to have for future projects. And we are able to use, even though that land is not in our service area, we're able to use, build mitigation land and use those credits to offset our environmental impacts. We do that in other parts of the county as well if it's outside of our service area. So they are applicable for our mitigation credits.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question from Director Croucher.
Yeah, so two things. One, with the mitigation, I think where I was going, I know that is a unique situation where we had a detachment, which is understandable. But as we prepare and we look at the future, I know that there's a cost variations and impacts when we do look at different areas, what the different areas have in value in regards to mitigation credits, and whether or not it's cheaper sometimes to buy the mitigation credits versus doing it ourselves within the areas. But just as one director, I like it when we can plan for the future to try to keep as much of the mitigation land that we're spending money on to do to improvements as much as possible that they are within the service area of the County Water Authority. So I know the unique situation, but for future purposes and planning, although we'll be throwing a curveball here or there, understandable. In regards to the multi-year plan adjustment for the detachment work, I think this would have been great information to be able to have during the time that we were discussing the impacts with LAFCO. This would have been great information that when we were being told that, no, you've planned for this, you're no longer going to need it, therefore you don't have to spend the money, therefore that rebate should go back. This would be the kind of information that would have been perfect at that point in time. So thank you.
Thank you for that insight, Director Croucher. Are there any other questions from directors? All right, seeing and hearing none, we are going to move to today's presentations. And before we start, we're going to have a few comments by none other than our General Manager, Dan, to kick us off, and followed by Leanna White, who's going to go over a presentation on the General Operating Department's overview.
No real comments here. Just welcome again to the second day. Like I said yesterday, we are going to cover everything on the departmental side today. Continue to take questions, answer those questions, all leading towards next month's budget and rates meeting, where we'll continue to refine things as we go forward. So still a work in progress, but thank you again for 2 days in a row. Leanna, go for it.
Great. Thank you. Good morning. Welcome back. So I'm going to give an overview of the operating department's budgets prior to the department heads coming up and reviewing each of the individual department budgets. So overall, the operating departments are increasing about 15%. That is primarily due to labor and benefits increases. And I do want to point out a couple of things here. We do have direct charges to CIP and grants, and that is about 20% of our labor costs when we have people directly charged to CIP and grants. We also do have capitalized overhead down at the bottom, and that is costs that are associated with operating departments. Like myself, I don't charge directly to CIP or grants, and so some of my costs are applied to capitalized overhead, which is then charged to the CIP. As we get through these slides, you'll see each department has some summary slides that are similar to this one on the screen, particular to their department. A few departments do have 2 pages. We have made some organizational changes, and these pages represent the current request, but then also if no changes had been made. So we did make some changes to reorganization for administrative services, so you'll see some changes there. You'll see some changes in finance, O&M, public affairs, the general manager's office, imported water, and water resources, but each department will go over what those changes are, but you will see 2 summary slides for each of those departments. There was a question at one of the last board meetings about what the Water Authority's labor and benefits are compared to the overall budget. And up on the screen, you'll see that the operating labor and benefits is about 6% of the total Water Authority budget, with the 2% in the dark purple there being the remaining non-personnel for operating departments. So the operating departments is 8% total, and we have 6% for operating labor and benefits. Labor and benefits consists of 258.5 full-time equivalent positions. This is no net increase from prior fiscal years. In fiscal year 24, at midterm, we eliminated 2 positions. And then with the increase in 1 position in engineering, that is actually a net change because we did reallocate a position. So there is no net increase in all of these departments. It still remains at 258.5. Now, just to give an overview of the position modifications, and you will hear more about this in each department, we did have one FTE transferred from the Colorado River program to the general manager's office. And we did have engineering FTE eliminated at midterm and a water resources FTE eliminated at midterm. And those are the two positions that you see decrease from 24 to 25. Additional modifications, we did have some transfers. So from administrative services, the purchasing division will now report to finance. So that's 4 FTEs. The facilities division that was in administrative services for Kearney Mesa is transferred to operations and maintenance. And then the receptionist has been transferred to public affairs. The imported water department combined the Colorado River program and the MWD program. And we did transfer a position back into imported water for 10 total FTEs for that new department. And then in water resources, we did eliminate or reallocate 1 FTE for the engineering position. So in addition to the position modifications, we have non-personnel transfers that you'll see in each department. This is a net zero impact to the operating departments, although there are increases overall for labor and benefits and CPI on services and everything else. But this is just a transfer between departments as we go through to 26, 27. So as we created the imported water department, you'll see a combination there. Facilities transferred to O&M for $1.6 million, purchasing transfers to finance. We transferred some professional services from imported water to the general manager's office. And then we transferred legal services from human resources into the general counsel's office. And then we did transfer some membership dues from water or from public affairs to water resources. And that concludes my portion of the presentation on the overall for operating departments.
Thank you, Liana. Are there any questions from directors? Director Serrano? Chair Serrano?
Just a quick question. How many vacant positions does the Water Authority currently have?
I will defer to human resources.
Oh.
Good morning. We currently have 24 vacancies.
And are those represented or are those management?
Mostly they are represented, but we're currently in recruitment status for 15 of those recruitments.
Okay. Do you know off the top of your head how many of them have been vacant for, say, over a year?
I don't have that information readily with me right now, but I'd be happy to find out for you and return with a complete response.
No worries at all. Just be interested to know.
Okay,
Thank
certainly.
you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Director Leahy?
Thank you. And maybe HR doesn't want to go back yet because, sorry, I believe, isn't there a new law that requires that we adopt a resolution identifying our vacancies? And is that coming with the budget? Because doesn't that have to also identify the term or the duration that they have been vacant?
So there's a new legislation, AB 2561, I believe that's what you're referring to, related to vacancies, recruitment, and retention. And I will be coming back to the board in next month to present a presentation on such data.
Okay, great. So I think that'll probably be what we want to see. And then I had a question, sorry, and it might even be for Nina. Sorry, Nina, you don't have a break yet. I saw that we removed or eliminated 1 FTE from engineering midterm. We're now adding an FTE back to engineering in this, or requesting it. And that was the one to prioritize the capital program. So how has the capital program been prioritized over the last 80 years?
So the FTE that's being asked for, well, let me take a step back. So we've been prioritizing the CIP really based on a 2 to 5 year outlook. We know that there's longer term projects, and that is what the board's requesting, is a longer term outlook, like a 20, 30 year outlook. We've really been focused on the 2 to 5 year, and we have identified long-term projects, but this would allow us to more solidify scope, schedule, estimated costs, and bringing it into all the other projects that we have. And so that's really the purpose of that CIP prioritization plan. We acknowledge that long-term outlook has been missing. Also, to be honest, we are under more financial constraints, so we have to be very specific on what we prioritize each 2 year based on the limitations of implementing a moderate CIP. So we need to have a better planning horizon and more accurate planning horizon as we look forward.
Okay. And so just for our general manager and our chief operating officer too, so that's something that I won't personally be able to support. I know at every other district and agency, the capital prioritization is done by the engineering manager or the district engineer or whatever related title, and that's done in-house. And then just to go full circle, this is why I have been asking when we did our master planning effort to make sure that we were incorporating all known projects, because we could have had the consultant prioritize those projects if we had addressed all of the facility needs and looked at what we knew we had to do. That could have already been done without the addition of an FTE. So going back, this is where I want to make sure we're looking more holistically, and when we're doing these planning efforts, that we're making sure we're incorporating some of that scope that wouldn't require an additional staff for a long-term effort. This seems like a one-time thing. You're doing it, and then you're just having to maintain it with existing staff. So that's where this is not something that I would be able to support, the additional person just to prioritize the CIP. And I want to make sure that we're making a more holistic and efficient approach when we're doing our planning efforts.
Thank you, Director Leahy. Director Fonseca.
Thank you. On this slide, I guess the previous one with the non-personnel transfers, I'd like to kind of get some clarification. So we're looking at transferring the money. So it's an even transfer? Are there cost savings involved with any of this, or is it just reallocation to rebalance everything?
It's a reallocation and reorganization of the transfers and the funds. We prioritized, operational efficiencies in transferring the purchasing division from admin services to finance, for example. All the costs that would have been budgeted in admin services are now just moved to finance.
Okay. And it sounds like what we're trying to do also is to try to rebalance our personnel, our staff also by moving people from one department to another.
Correct.
Right.
Director Croucher.
There we go. On the legal services transfer from human resources to general counsel, on that one, I know that there's from time to time some things that we need a independent counsel for purposes of that would be related to HR, whether it be internal deals with the general manager, general counsel, stuff like that. Does our HR continue to have the ability to use without it being under our general counsel's purview?
The general counsel is the legal representative for the agency. So unless the general counsel is the subject of an investigation, then this office would direct outside counsel's activities.
Okay.
Now, to your point about independent counsel for all sorts of HR matters, that's what we use.
And I understand general counsel stuff falls under you.
Correct.
But I think there's been some times even within this agency that we've had to separate it from legal counsel to where it's been under HR, whether it's been MWD or us. And it's had to been, so does the way it was set up, did HR have the ability to go out on their own for counsel, if given direction by the board, to have that counsel available to them without direct oversight of our general counsel? And will it remain the same, or will this eliminate that ability?
The admin code places in the general counsel the authority to hire and manage outside counsel. The board can always hire outside counsel and create rules for the employment of that counsel. When we changed our code of conduct and we went through that whole process with Director Hogan, there's some steps in there that deal with what I think you're talking about. When there's a director investigation or a general manager investigation or general counsel investigation, there's some guideposts in there that dictate how counsel is retained and who oversees them. So there is this exception for board and general manager, general counsel to keep that independent nature alive.
Okay, so
that's where that's at.
Yes, so by transferring this $150,000, is that taking away the ability of our HR department to have them report directly to them if directed by the board? Or
No,
would
this is simply accounting. This is, and it's something the Water Authority's always done. So a lot of the operating departments have budget for outside counsel. That outside counsel is still hired and managed through the general counsel's office, just the budget lives in a different location. Here, we just brought what used to be in the HR's budget line item into the general counsel's budget for a line item. So, it's not a substantive change in terms of how outside counsel is managed, HR or any other department for that matter. It's simply finding a new home for it in the budget.
Okay, so before it would have been handled, this budgetary amount would have been handled by HR.
It would have been in the HR's budget, but we moved it.
Now it'll be handled by your budget.
Correct.
Okay, so as long as that doesn't restrict HR's ability to be able to still do their job when necessary, then I'm fine with it.
That it doesn't change substantive, like I said, the execution of what's been going on in the past.
Well, HR would have been in charge of its own bucket of money for this particular point. Now that bucket of money will fall under you, correct?
Well, yeah, but the same process will still be engaged. For example, if HR...
Yeah, fully understand the same process is there,
Yeah.
but the bucket of money is now being, that responsibility for that budget now falls under you versus HR having its own $150,000 to be able to do things. It's just, I understand it's a budget move.
Yeah.
The process is the same, but it does take away HR's individual or being able to be a little bit on their own if given an assignment to us, or we, as in the board, have more direct impact on your budget as opposed to the HR budget.
It raises the budget, but
that's fine. No, you answered the question, so thanks.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions from directors or comments? Going once, twice. That was Director Leahy. I'm kidding. All right. We're going to move on to the next presentation, the Administrative Services with Jason Foster.
Good morning, Chair Abdullahi, members of the board. I am Jason Foster, the Director of Administrative Services, and it's my pleasure to present to you an overview of the General Manager's recommended budget for the Administrative Services Department for fiscal years 26 and 27. So a quick overview of the divisions and functions moving forward within Administrative Services. Our divisions include Administration and Records, which handles our records management program and the associated electronic records management system. It obtains and maintains our administrative policies, and it handles a number of other miscellaneous administrative duties. We're also the home for Information Systems, which basically supports all aspects of our agency's business network systems and data, including hardware, software, online and cloud services, phones, and other technical support for all of our staff and all of our meeting facilities, including the boardroom. We're also the home for Information Security, which protects our critical business systems and data from all sorts of cyber threats. We handle the agency's multiple layers of defense in alignment with cyber best practices, as well as perform threat detection and response, and we also are responsible for training staff. And finally, our Risk Management and Safety Division is responsible for running our safety programs and ensuring all of the regulatory compliance obligations that go with that. It also helps handle emergency management, and it also handles risk management, which means handling claims and also managing our business lines of insurance, which is liability, property, and workers' compensation. So our activities over the current two-year budget, I'll try and go through this quickly, but we've upgraded a number of our business applications, including our asset management system and also the system that all of the member agencies use for placing their water orders online with us. We've upgraded the AV technology in this boardroom and also the board voting software. We've made a number of cybersecurity improvements, including enhanced identity protection, enhanced abilities to monitor the dark web. We've installed new firewalls, and we've also made other improvements such as automating our incident management system and centralizing our security logs, which makes it a lot easier to detect anomalies and respond to threats. We've also improved our security awareness training program. As you all know, one of the biggest threats facing any organization is people clicking on the wrong stuff. And so those threats are getting more sophisticated every year, so we've boosted the training to help handle that threat. Elsewhere in the department, we've recently collaborated with the Operations and Maintenance Department as well as the Federal Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency to do an assessment of security on our operational technology systems and architecture. We've also recently secured a $250,000 grant that will help us in the future with incident response planning and related training. In safety, we've improved fall protection and confined space rescue capabilities at some of our First Aqueduct structures recently. We've updated our confined space rescue program and training, which has been a high priority due to the number of entries our staff make on a daily basis. Those activities are actually the result of a comprehensive safety program analysis we did early in the current budget cycle, which has helped identify improvements that we can make in our safety culture and our practices. We also upgraded our video surveillance systems here at Kearney Mesa and our electronic records management system. So moving to the future, what do we want to do to help support the agency moving forward in the next two-year budget? Those activities include in implementing some enhanced features in our Microsoft 365 software that can help streamline workflows and improve our security. We plan also to consolidate our wide area network and internet service architecture. This is both to help improve reliability and also we expect it to lower costs. We're going to be supporting the build out of the IT and cyber infrastructure at the new Escondido Operations Center. So as it comes online, we're going to make sure it's fully integrated into our business network and also aligned with our security protocols. We also have an aging data center that's going to need replacement. The data center is basically the backbone infrastructure for all of our business network hardware and data. There are several updates that we plan to make to our enterprise software that manages our financials, our HR, payroll, benefits. In cybersecurity, we're going to continue to implement and maintain measures that align us with recognized best practices for cybersecurity, including in making improvements in cloud security, which is emerging as a priority. And then, as I mentioned, we're going to be doing our updates to the business continuity and disaster recovery plans using the grant funds that I recently mentioned. In safety, we're going to be stepping up our training to help maintain our safety and regulatory compliance and ensure that we have a strong safety culture moving forward and strong practices to keep our workers safe. We are going to continue to aggressively market our coverages for business insurance to try and keep our premiums as low as possible, which is obviously very challenging. We will look at assessing and potentially initiating a tunnel safety program for regulatory compliance involving entries to some of our larger underground structures. And we'll look to update our records management and retention policies to stay on top of best practices and hopefully make further efficiencies. So as Leanna mentioned, there's been a number of recent organizational changes around the agency, and our Department in Admin Services has been involved in a number of them. Just to recap, we've had receptionist responsibilities have been moved to public affairs. Kearney Mesa facilities and maintenance, so all the maintenance for this building and the related grounds has been transferred to the Operations and Maintenance Department. Purchasing responsibilities are being transferred to the Finance Department. All of these moves are basically designed to support effective business operations, basically concentrating tasks where there's the best staff and resources available for that. When you got your budget last month, not all of these changes had been implemented yet. So when you see your updated budget for May, all of those changes will be reflected there. So in terms of the personnel changes in administrative services, we did have a reclassification of a position. We had a vacant Office Assistant 2 that was reclassed to a safety officer to meet the needs of bolstering our safety program. The receptionist position was transferred to Public Affairs. There is a facilities services technician that is going to operations and maintenance along with to support the responsibilities related to that task. And then the purchasing division, which has 4 positions, is being transferred to finance. So in our non-labor categories, our services are going up by about $800,000, or about 21%. There are several main drivers for this. For example, in information systems, we depend a lot on virtual servers. Usually that has benefits of reducing our hardware costs, but there are licenses involved for that, and we saw a steep increase in those licensing costs. About $143,000 is projected over the next 2 years. We've also, there are increased costs related to our cyber services, including security incident and event management, access management, network controls, threat monitoring, and threat detection and response. Those increases amount to about $170,000. And then we also incorporated confined space rescue services into the risk and safety program and admin services. Previously, these were housed in O&M. So those have been moved into our budget, and due to the need to increase the number of rescue support necessary to maintain Cal OSHA compliance, there's been an increase in the services projected over the next 2 years, and that's going to be just south of $500,000. Elsewhere, though, we do have decreases. Our supplies are going to go down by about $123,000, or 30%. That's primarily due to the transfer of facilities costs to O&M. Our utilities costs are expected to go down by about $110,000, or about 28%. Some of that is due to our water and sewer bills going to O&M along with the facilities responsibilities, but most of that savings is actually due to the consolidation of our WAN and internet services that I mentioned earlier. We expect those will help reduce our internet-related bills over the next 2 years by about $83,000. Unfortunately, insurance is not an area where costs are going down. We are expecting about a $423,000 increase over the next 2 years, about 12% over current budget. And this is due to premium increases stemming from recent claims, and also just the tough market conditions that I'm sure everyone is facing at your own agencies. So finally, leases and rent increases amount to about $26,000, or 11%. This is due to a need to lease additional air monitoring and related equipment to support our shutdowns. In our other category, it's going up by about $10,000, or about 4%. That's just to cover just the ongoing needs for staff training, especially for our IT and our cyber staff. And lastly, our fixed assets are going down by about $35,000, or about 78%. We had fixed assets was where we had the cost for improving the boardroom in our current budget, and that projects have been completed, so those costs are falling off, and that's why we have the savings there, or the reduction there. So this slide summarizes our variances from our current budget to our proposed budget, recommended budget for 26 and 27. This slide represents all of the changes and the transfers that we've discussed. Overall, our labor and benefits is going down by about 1%, with basically the movement of the positions out of the department mitigating just the overall increases in labor and benefit costs that Leanne mentioned earlier. Our non-labor costs are going up by about 11%, and then when you account for capitalized overhead, it's basically the department operating budget is going up by about 2%. For transparency, this is what the department budget would have looked like without all of the reorganization and without the transfers of the different responsibilities and positions to those other departments. And you can see there that, obviously both of those changes amount to several $1 million still being in this department, and the overall increase to the budget would be about 22%. So that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer questions.
All right, thank you, Jason. We have a few comments. Director Leahy?
Thank you. I'm not sure what slide it was because our deck is different numbering than yours. So on the personnel changes, there's a reclassification of office assistant 2 to a safety officer. That's proposed in this budget?
Whoops.
Or was that already done?
That is a change that has been made.
It's already been made. Was
Correct.
that something that the board saw, and is there an increase? Don't we have to approve reclassifications? if there's an increase in total compensation, and I would imagine there was an increase in total compensation between Office Assistant 2 and Safety Officer.
Catherine, I'd ask you to come up and answer that, but I think that that's within the discretion of the general manager. Could be wrong.
Okay.
Thank you, Dan. That's also my understanding that it's under your authority as so long as we bring it forward to the board at the interim period budget review.
Okay. Okay. To our Chief Operating Officer, I'd like to, this is very confusing, looking at where positions are moving. 100 slides on an operating budget of $100 million or less than $65 million is a lot. I'd like to see a consolidated list of all the FTEs, the movement of where they went, where we've added or where we're proposing to add those positions of those new FTEs. And I'd like to see the fully burdened cost impact, including benefits and all the additional expenses, in a consolidated list, because looking from slide to slide, even that last slide, no offense, that last slide between the two budgets of what it could have been versus what it is, when we flip between slides, it's not easily digestible, I'll say that. So if we could see a consolidated list of where we're planning on moving people and what the total impact is of those FTEs, additions, subtractions, whatever it might be, I think that would be helpful for the board to be able to really understand. Seeing all the pluses and minuses, it just kind of, it feels a lot like a little bit like a shell game of we're moving things here and there, and like it's hard to follow the money. So I'd appreciate seeing that consolidated, like where positions went to and what the total compensation change is. I'd like to better understand if there are cost impacts to reclassification, why the board doesn't have authority for changing that or approving that. And I'll be very clear, I have no issues with the safety officer. It's more of the practice of not having the ability to see that we're increasing the cost to the agency without having the oversight of that.
So Director Leahy, we can, of course, put that together. I would anticipate what you will see, what this board will see, is something that resembles a almost net zero change. You're going to see FTEs going from one department to another, with the exception of perhaps the reclassifications that are embedded in there, where you would see a nominal increase in salaries. But in the end, the work product will likely be a list that says -1 here, +1 there, et cetera, with a dollar amount. Is that acceptable? Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. And I think that it's important to see the reclassifications, because we say we're moving one FTE from one place to another, we're resulting in a net zero. But if we're taking a lower paid position, a $20 an hour position, then moving it to a $90 an hour position just on salary, not including fully burning costs, there's a giant impact to that. But not only that, but then also our pension deficit, pension liability. So I want to see those full costs and what those impacts are to the agency, because it's not just the dollars per hour rate change, and there might be a bigger impact than we're actually realizing. The net zero change in FTEs doesn't necessarily mean a net zero impact to the budget. So yes, thank you.
Thank you. We'll be having comments from Director Norman, followed by Chair Serrano, and then Director Ray.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really got a question that's more organizational, and that is how public records requests are handled. Are they in the administrative realm of the organization? Is it public affairs? Is it, you know, your section because of the records? And how do we coordinate responses to some of those more hefty subpoenas and things? And I have some knowledge about that, so I'm very interested in how we handle it here.
So when we get a public records request, whether it comes to any agency, any director, it always comes to my office. Okay. We are sort of ground zero for the management of collection of documents. Then it's all hands on deck for, you know, getting us the responsive documents, and then the general counsel's office will respond and provide documents and letters and that sort of thing. So we manage it.
Thanks. Chair Serrano?
Thank you. Forgive me, I should probably know this, but where is the Water Authority currently renting space?
We aren't really renting space. If you saw things under the leases and rents category, that's usually for leasing equipment. But it's just that's the leases with rent is the common category that it's called.
Appreciate the clarification. And then I had a question on I saw the significant decrease in the supply budget. Does your department handle supplies across the organization?
Our department handles office supplies for the organization.
I imagine that was the case given the number, but that's why I wanted the clarity.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
If I can just follow up, Director Serrano, two things come to mind with rent and leases. So what you're going to see in the Colorado River program is a lease for our Imperial Valley office, as well as in the MET program, we do lease office space at Metropolitan headquarters. Just as a side note.
And both offices are used?
Yes.
Okay. As I think the nature of my question is, at the City of San Diego, because of our budget situation, we've had to relook at all of our office space and bring a lot of our employees back into city-owned properties as opposed to leased properties. It sounds like there's not a ton of office space that you're currently leasing, so I don't know if that's a worthwhile exercise of examining, nor do I think that the Water Authority may have the own space in order to accommodate those employees, especially given those locations, obviously. But that was the nature of my question, which is it was an opportunity for the city to generate savings, significant savings at that, and I didn't know if that was a similar exercise that could be worked out here, but I imagine not.
Yeah, I think that there's an opportunity just in terms of the Imperial Valley space and the Met space. I think there's an opportunity to review the Met space and what we want to do with that going forward. The Water Authority has had a presence in the Imperial Valley for 20 or so years in the same office space, and I would suggest that sticks.
I would agree with you on Imperial Valley. I would definitely be interested in looking at the Met space.
All right, thank you. Director Ray, followed by Director Scalzetti.
Thank you, Chair. In the 26-27 initiatives, can you tell me, implement enhanced Microsoft 365 functions? Like, what exactly do you have to implement? 365 is under my understanding, because I have that at my district, it's a subscription-based program that you do upgrades to automatically. So what is it that you have to do in regards to implement that?
That's a great question, Director Ray. So Microsoft 365 is available at different levels and different tiers for both commercial and government service. And what we have is a G5 level license, and there are tools available in the G5 license that we haven't implemented. There are capabilities, for example, as expanding the use of Teams phones, which allows greater portability of work numbers to help support remote workers, for example, or other staff that are on the go. There are also improved capabilities for data classification and records management in there as well. There are also enhanced security features that are kind of more behind the scenes that help allow you to secure the Microsoft environment and points connecting to it a lot better. So that is in a nutshell, but if you would like more detail, I'll be happy to follow up.
No, I understand what the enhanced securities are, but my question is, are these all separate? I guess a more detailed question is, are these all separate programs that you have to install and implement on every workstation, every laptop? Is it separate from the regular 365 upgrades that would happen automatically?
Most of these upgrades can be centrally controlled.
Okay. And then, sorry, I just have two more questions. The support build out of the IT and cyber infrastructure for the new operations center, is the actual infrastructure, the hardware and things like that, is that in the budget, the administrative services budget, or is it in the operations budget?
The hardware and the equipment for the building is in the tenant improvements budget that has been discussed separately. I don't know if you want to come up, Eva, to talk about that. But most of the work that we're talking about there is that, we have the equipment being purchased as part of the tenant improvements, but they still have to be installed and configured correctly and connected to the system. And so that work is being done by the admin services.
Okay.
Helped by the admin services. So does that help
Yes,
explain? Okay.
yes. And then my final question is, whose identity and dark web monitoring are we, like whose identity are we protecting and whose identity are we monitoring under the dark web? I guess I'm confused. Are you protecting the identity of the water authority's customers, which are the member agencies, or I was just confused about that.
So, that's another. It's another great question.
Because I'm going to cancel my identity protection service if you're doing it for me.
The identity protection services are largely for our staff and management. And anyone basically kind of trying to connect to the system, you want to make sure that their identities can be confirmed. And as far as the dark web monitoring is concerned, I mean, bad information turns up on the dark web all the time, and sometimes it's an indicator that you've been hacked and maybe you don't even know it yet. So there's all sorts of information that can be posted to the dark web related to whether it's financials or personnel records or whatnot, and just having an eye on that helps make sure that if we see anything that flags back to us, then it indicates we have a problem. That, in summary, that's kind of the issue there.
Okay, so you're saying like when the employees log on to the system, say maybe through VPN or something like that, is that what you're talking about? Like you're enhancing your VPN network and stuff like that to make sure that when they're logging on, their logon information is protected from being exposed?
Yes. Essentially, it's part of our system of having defense in depth with cyber practices. VPN has its own security controls to make sure that you have encryption in your connections. But then there are other ways and other parts that you can have identities compromised and try to gain access to your system. And so you just have it's constant system of verifications for different entry points into the business network.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Director Scalzetti.
Thank you for letting me speak. I'm not on the committee. I think as Helix is concerned, we did have some concerns about the full-time employee on the engineering for prioritization. I do think a consultant would be more efficient if you had a master plan for even 5 years and kind of update it through those years with staff, because some of these projects are 10, 15, 20 years out. So I don't see the benefit from having a full-time person on prioritization. But that being said, the switching around of employees through different areas and of the organization is fine. Some people want more data of how much is going to be and how much the difference are. I guess our feeling is that this is Mr. Denham's ship, and he's going to weight all that. So however he wants to run his crew is fine, but if he goes outside the budget and increases on salary and those things, he's going to feel the blunt of it. And I just want to be clear on that. I don't want to get too much into the weeds on how much employee is A over here or B over there, but it is going to fall on your shoulders, Mr. Denham.
Thank you. I appreciate that and understand it. The follow-up that I would have to your comment on the FTE in engineering, and especially in light of Director Leahy's comments, I think that what we can do is come back with an estimate of what that would cost on a professional services basis rather than an FTE.
All right. I don't see any other questions. Thank you so much, Jason.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to bring Nina back so we can have a presentation on engineering.
Okay, good morning again. All right, so with regards to engineering, just a department overview, we are responsible primarily for the design and construction of our CIP projects. We also, as I spoke yesterday, have energy-related initiatives, and then we have a right-of-way group that is responsible for the acquisition and management of our water authority right-of-way. And really, they're the eyes on the road for our 300 miles of pipelines. As far as accomplishments this past 2 year, we are on track by the end of June to execute 100% of the 183.9 million CIP. Typically, over the past 10 years, the trend has been 92%, but we are on track to spend every dollar of that 183.9 million. Also, within the energy group, we received the board approval of our energy policy in 2023. We also, as I mentioned yesterday, we executed a wholesale market access tariff with Clean Energy Alliance, which is realizing savings on the generation side at the desal plant. With our right-of-way group, they were very busy this year. They resolved 21 encroachments. They also responded to an average of 439 dig alerts. That's per month, not per year. It's per month that they respond to. So that 1-800 dig alert, they respond to all of those calls. We also completed 32 right-of-way permits and agreements, and then we have a tree removal service. So we were required to remove 9 trees in our right-of-way. We also, in regards to leases, we also acquired a new lease for the space at the MWD headquarters for our imported water group. In FY 24-25, the board approved 3 positions in engineering. We did fill 2 of the 3 positions. We were on track to fill the senior engineer position as of the midterm budget, but due to the board deferring several projects at the midterm, we rescinded that offer, and we're currently in the recruitment for that senior engineer position ahead of executing the FY 26-27 recommended CIP. So looking forward, our initiatives in this next 2 year is to execute the 183.9 million recommended CIP. Also, with regards to energy, we're looking to focus our efforts on improving energy resilience at many of our facilities, and also look at ways to reduce our energy costs. In addition, right-of-way will continue their efforts in terms of responding to those dig alerts, right-of-way patrols, as well as doing private development plan reviews. You've heard earlier that we are looking to add an FTE for the CIP planning and prioritization effort. This would not be a one-time effort. This would be an ongoing effort in perpetuity. It is being a repurposed FTE. As far as non-personnel expenses, we had increases of about $150,000 or 15%. That is primarily related to our commitments with regards to the Elfin Forest Recreation Reserve. We're responsible for 75% of those management costs, and this reserve was a result of building the Leeuwenhoek Dam. In addition, we have an increase in energy legal support services. These support services assist us with any questions we may have on the changes in the energy market and energy requirements. In addition, we had an increase in the tree removal budget in right-of-way, as well as our software needs changed based on software being outdated. So we've had to replace old software with new software. In addition, we had some decreases. So we did with the computers for the new positions. Those were purchased this last budget cycle, so we have a decrease of about $14,000. We also have a decrease in our conferences, travel, and training, as well as we had a one-time potential encroachment and vehicle equipment cost in this last budget cycle with a decrease of $20,000. So overall, engineering's recommended operating budget is $10.4 million. That's $1.4 million more than the amended FY 24-25 budget, or 16%, most of which is related to the labor and benefits increases. And so you can see that the services category is where you see the increase, and again, that's mostly related to the Elfin Forest Reserve commitments. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Nina. Are there any questions or comments from directors? Director Leahy?
Sorry, how many projects do we do a year in engineering?
Over the 2 year, it's about 200. It's about 200 projects.
You're actively completing 200 projects a year?
We are working on 200 projects. They may not be completing. As you know, our design through construction, it's about a 2 to 3 year period. So we may start in design and then it continues into the next 2 year budget cycle.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none. Thank you so much, Nina. We are going to move to finance with Lisa Marie Harris.
All right. Good morning, Chair Abdullahi and Board of Directors. Lisa Marie Harris. I'm going to give you an overview of finance. Next slide. So the finance department currently has two divisions. We have one division, which is general accounting. That group prepares the controller's report each month, the financial statements, and works with the annual audit, as well as then we have the second division, which is where the budget, payroll, rates and charges, and the investment of our portfolio lies. And upon the incorporation of the purchasing division, we'll have a third division. But as Leanna noted, it's not fully baked into your budget until May. Next slide. So some accomplishments that finance is very proud of is, number one, we were able to work with the MAR Group over many years to create a new fixed transportation charge. We were able to create a comparison tool that helps our member agencies look at all our rates and charges and all the various scenarios when we do change rates. We did develop the 5-year forecast. We implemented a new budget and financial planning software, and then we also strengthened our vendor master database process. And this is important because it helps alleviate or mitigate any fraud. There's quite a bit of fraud in the vendor world, and so having that master database really does minimize fraud. Next slide. So in terms of initiatives, we're going to complete the cost of service for the calendar 2026 and 2027 rates and charges. We're going to begin the heavy lift of adopting and planning out the long-range financing plan. We've mentioned a lot about that. And again, that is a critical plan to be completed and adopted by the board prior to going to market in 2026. As we always have, we're going to continue to proactively manage the debt portfolio and seek any opportunities for savings or restructuring as needed. And we, of course, we're going to implement any GASBs. The GASBs seem to be quite busy, and we have 2 statements that are going to be adopted this year, but there's many more in the future. Next slide. In addition, we're going to obtain the CMTA investment policy certification. We're going to continue to review and monitor and amend, if necessary, the pension and OPEB policy. And then we're going to continue, obviously, to really actively invest in our investment portfolio. We've generated millions of dollars in savings to offset rates and charges, so we'll continue to actively manage that investment portfolio. Next slide. In terms of personnel changes, as is noted, we're receiving 4 new positions from purchasing, from admin to our department. And so that'll be a change. And then in terms of overall increases to our budget, we're looking at service increases. These are all contractual services. We're seeing increases from our contractors, including the cost of service consultant, the disclosure and bond counsel, and financial advisory services, which all add up to approximately $200,000. Next slide. So then the overall budget that finance is asking for is $11.5 million, an increase in 31%, which is driven mostly by labor and benefits, and then that labor and benefits is actually even more higher as a result of purchasing. Just so you can see the next slide, if we didn't have purchasing coming into our department, we would only be asking for a $9.7 million request, increasing by $916,000 and a 10% budget. So, but going back before, as you can see, with the new purchasing team joining the finance department, we're looking at a $2.7 million increase into the finance department. So that concludes my portion of the presentation. I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you. We have a few questions. Director Leahy, followed by Director Ray.
Left that on.
All right. Director Ray.
Thank you. I was wondering, typically cost of service studies are done every 5 years, and this agency chooses to do them every year, and they're pretty expensive endeavors, so especially for an agency this size. So I was wondering what the thought process was by doing a cost of service study every single year here. What leadership here thought that it's an important endeavor to do, because it's an expensive endeavor. So
No, I would agree, and we've actually opposed reducing the number of years or every year that we do it, and whenever that's suggested, the board pushes hard back and says they want a cost of service. But we're more than happy to not conduct one every year, but that's been the board's direction.
Yeah, Director Ray, I think, in the past, and the past at this point is probably 15 years, we only brought a cost of service forward to the board when there was a real rate element design change. And so we can go back to that sort of thing. But yeah, I think I agree with Lisa Marie. It's been the discretion of this board to have one every year associated with the rates and charges.
So I guess I pose the question to the board. Do we feel like we have to do one every year because we're justifying our rates to people? Or, I mean, it just is so expensive. And I mean, we have really qualified people here on staff. And I think that if that's a significant savings, maybe the board should think about whether we want to keep doing them annually.
Director Arendt?
Yeah, in response to your question, I just have to make an observation. What I've seen over the last few years is every year the board of directors imposes a higher degree of oversight on our staff by using outside consultants to review our work, or the issue of now we need somebody to reevaluate our CIP prioritization and so forth. We need to hire extra people to make sure we're doing a good job financially inside the organization. To me, to do a cost of service study every year when there is no material change in the structure of the rates is a waste of money. So the board has to make a decision. Do you want all this oversight, and do you want to pay for it? We need to think long and hard about that, because it costs money every time we hire an outside consultant. A lot of this, comes from requests of a few member agencies, but we have to evaluate from the board standpoint how much oversight on top of oversight do we need? Thank you.
Director Leahy?
Thank you. And I'll add that a lot of these requests, and just to tag on to what you just said, a lot of my requests at least, I have full confidence that our existing staff can do some of these requests in-house. I think that, again, I'm not clear on how we can't internally prioritize capital projects or some of these other efforts. I think our Met staff are fully capable of performing some of these efforts without outside consultant assistance. Going back to the cost of service study and the rates, I would ask and support with this board that we look at doing these on a longer term process, doing a rate process on a longer term process, and not doing an every year effort. This takes a lot of staff time. We've got 40 people sitting in this audience. There's probably, I don't know, $30,000 an hour sitting in this room. We have 200 and whatever slides. This is a big effort that we're doing on an annual basis, and if we extend that and do it every 2 years, every 5 years, like other agencies do, this might be something that we can look at and be more efficient at. So thank you.
If I could just comment on that, Director Leahy, in Good News Pierce's former life, he was a cost of service consultant. We could certainly pause the 2026 cost of service study. The savings on that is roughly $40,000 to $50,000.
All right, Chair Serrano?
And I guess I would just ask the question, in Lisa Marie, how much does it cost generally for a cost of service study to be performed for all the members of the public who are listening?
I'll defer to Pierce.
Yeah, so it depends. A lot of the time, we have a contract about $100,000 a year budgeted for the cost of service report. It's a not to exceed amount. We have not been using that full amount on the Corollo contract for the last couple of years, at least. You may recall that the board also requested that we had a third-party review of the cost of service report 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. So that contract was right around another $100,000 as well. So,
and then we also had the HDR contract.
And then we had the HDR contract for the facilitation of the MAR process. Mm-hmm. All of that can be done in-house. And so we're happy to oblige that request should we get direction from the board. But I would say, even kilter, the minimum annual spend would be about $40,000-$50,000 on the cost of service report. Should there be additional changes that are significant, rate redesigns, those types of things, then you're going to look at more hours from the Carollo contract or the cost of service contract, and you'd inch closer towards that 100,000 maximum.
Mm-hmm. Understood. So assuming the board doesn't pause the one that's currently underway, what's the timeline for completion?
Well, we could eliminate the contract, but I do believe that given that there are some changes, like the addition of the new transportation fixed charge, and then the work that the general managers are conducting, that does result in material changes in rates and charges. So I think, unfortunately, now's not the time probably to eliminate at least this year or next year. But there's been years where there's been zero material change and we've still conducted a cost of service. And those are the years we should probably consider not funding.
Understood. And I appreciate that recommendation. I mean, but in terms of the completion of the one currently, what's your timeline for doing that?
The cost of service, well, we're trying to get it done for this rate and charge period, right?
Yeah, so once we get direction from the board in terms of the budget as well as rates, then there's going to be a draft cost of service report. If we go pencils down now, we can save that $40,000 to $50,000 because the majority of the heavy lift would be incurred during the May-June timeframe.
Can I add to that, Pierce? I would say just in general, if you take last year's cost of service report, it will resemble probably what this board sees for this new cost of service report because there hasn't been a real material change to the rate design here at the Water Authority. The rate design change last year was the new fixed revenue component for the transportation, so that'll be covered. But largely what you all saw last year is what you will see with new numbers.
Yeah, I asked the question because I know that member agencies have certainly expressed to me a desire to see it, so I was just trying to get a sort of ETA.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
All right, Director Vespi.
Thank you, Chair. I would just want to also say that the city is supportive of a longer cost of service study period or rate setting period. I think just structurally it makes sense to adopt a 2-year rate, right, up to amounts. I know a lot of the agencies in the room do that. It would also line up with the biannual budget, which for the record, I wish I had a biannual budget in my day job. Mm-hmm. But also I want to say that with all due respect, Gary, the over review of information by outside consultants, I think a lot of that's been driven by the asks from this board for preparing for the structural changes and decrease in demands that have been facing this agency for some time now, and the lack of kind of willingness to accept and adapt to the change conditions. I think a lot of the ask for outside consultants to get in to look at this stuff was to make changes for those change conditions, and unfortunately, that hasn't been an outcome with all the consultant work, but thank you.
Since I was addressed directly by Director Vespi, I would say I may have a different point of view about that. Most of those requests have come from, indeed, your agency. And here's an example. We have a third party examining the work of a second party on our rates. How far do we go, Matt? Do we go to 5 parties, 6 parties? I'm just saying that here we are trying to control costs, and we're picking at every dollar bill that we spend, but yet we have generated some of these costs that we're now dealing with. Right. So that's my only point.
I agree with you, Gary, but the contract I was referring to was, I think, the HDR one related to the MAR work. But I think the point also that I'm trying to make is Pierce is extremely sharp. The finance team there's a lot of bright folks in this organization that I think have understood the demand forecast facing this agency, but we still haven't been responsive to planning for structural changes to prepare for what was coming, what is now here, right? Let's look back to 2012. That's when the city committed to pure water, right? We started moving dirt in like 2017 or 2018. I know I made this comment yesterday, but now there's been a real big uptick in rhetoric about pure water being a problem in the cost of water of this agency, right? This agency didn't build Pure Water Phase 1 into its long-range planning documents until 2021, 4 or 5 years after we started moving dirt. That's where my concerns are, and Pierce and Lisa Marie are, I think, more than equipped to help us with guiding through that. But we need the structural changes in order to prepare, because I'm going to tell you now, Phase 2 of Pure Water is coming. And that's about 10 years out, which is about the same amount of time of notice we had for Phase 1, and we didn't prepare for that adequately, and now we're here living it. And I just hope we can do better as an agency to be prepared for Phase 2 and the other local supply projects that are on the horizon.
I appreciate the director's comments, their engagement, and their passion. That just shows you how dedicated we are to this process. So thank you both, and thank you everyone who has been giving their comments. I think we know the challenges that are facing us, and the reason why we're spending 2 days doing these workshops, so that we're making sure that as we're approaching this budget season and rates and charges, that we are turning every stone in regards to making sure that we are thinking about our ratepayers, and also the feasibility and sustainability of this agency. So again, I appreciate everyone's comments. We have a couple of more speakers on the queue, and so we will move to Director Croucher, followed by our Vice Chair Hilliker.
Thank you. And and I fully support the concept of looking at where we can make some savings without double checking, triple checking and stuff. And I think that's this board talking about how we have confidence in our current staff. I think you're listening. But I would love to look beyond just the cost of service every year to where it's every other year or whatever that we could do there. Also, other items such as the prioritization of the CIPs, whether or not we really have to have that done outside or inside or within the process. But what else? What other ones are we hiring contractors for beyond? And I guess that's why I look to staff and saying, where do you see that we're doing the double, triple, quadruple checks on our own work where we don't necessarily need to have that done, and what's that costing us with it? As far as change in direction with water supplies and projections, I think staff is listening. I think this board, as its present makeup, has made that very clear. I think it's been discussed for several years, if not decades, the change from when we had to ramp up to where it leveled off and then it ramps back down. We're ramping back down. I think, as Director Vespi had talked about back as far as 2011 or 2012, but I think there's also during that period of time things like the San Diego County Grand Jury that weighed in on where we sat within the process. And both CWA and the City of San Diego responded to those county grand jury requests for additional storage, for the desal, for all those things, and including the City of San Diego's response from the mayor and city council that they agree with the finding that San Diego should maintain a diversified water supply portfolio, which includes desal and other things. So it's, while we can all talk about where we currently sit, where we've been in the past, at this point, where do we want to go? And within that, I think we need staff's recommendations, staff's expertise, and then the board's backing in regards to that, as long as it's, I mean, this board is pretty diverse and brings a lot of different experience and knowledge to place. And I think, as Director Scalzetti had said, it falls on our general manager. And I agree with that. And I think we have a very capable general manager that we need to be able to move forward with and stop these second, third, fourth costly reviews of what our staff work has done, and be able to move forward and save the region some funds that don't necessarily need to be spent.
All right, Vice Chair Hilliker.
Well, my question was, and I think it's kind of been answered in a roundabout way, but has any of these extra reviews shown any cost savings?
No.
No, right? So, all I can say is I agree with Gary, respectively, Matt. I don't agree with you. And remember, pure water is just going to raise water rates. That's why in Lakeside we don't have it.
Director Paul?
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. On slide 151 is a finance department without reorganization. I'd like to ask if we could have the same slide for a purchasing department without reorganization.
So there is no purchasing department. The purchasing division was within the admin department, which is what Jason Foster just shared with you. So 4 staff members from admin moved into finance.
Is that a no? Or is that a no or a yes?
Director Paul, can you restate your question?
Sure. Slide 151 says finance department without reorganization. Can we have a slide that says purchasing group without reorganization?
And that information was found in Jason Foster's slide because it was housed in admin. Jason, you want to pull that slide back up and so we can see it?
If I may, it sounds like there's a request for a slide specifically for that division.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on. Director Vespi and then Director Freehoff.
No, that's going to look.
Thanks, Chair. Just Frank, just a reminder that Pure Water started as a wastewater project, serves 2/3 of the region. Not your agency, but 2/3 of the Water Authority's customers. So thank you.
Director Freehoff.
Great, thank you. I appreciate the conversation and the dialogue. I think where we are currently is that our general manager, I think, is doing a really good job now of being transparent, more transparent about our current situation at the Water Authority. And so I feel much more comfortable not having to have that double check, whatever Director Rant had mentioned, because I think that's something we were missing. I think we're being more transparent now on what the member agencies are doing in regards to local supplies and what our demands are going to look like. So I do appreciate that, Dan. Thank you. I know there's been some cost controls that have been made over the last budget, but I still think we can look for more potentially. And one of the things I know that in the City of San Diego's letter, they had requested, and I appreciate the staff putting out the responses to the board. I think it was Monday night, late, but it was nice to have those. And they asked the question regarding potentially reducing our professional services contracts, and that to provide a list to the board of all our professional services contract, and the staff responded that we will get that at a future meeting. So that's a question I have as to when we'll receive that. And then on the cost of service study, I know many of our, if not all of our member agencies, we do hire consultants to do cost of service. And that is because primarily we have to comply with Prop 218. And so we want to legally make sure that we are complying with Prop 218. Now, my understanding is the Water Authority doesn't have to comply with Prop 218. So again, perhaps we should look at that again with Pierce's knowledge and experience that maybe it is something we don't need. So those are my comments, and I'd appreciate a response to my question in regards to all the services contracts that we do receive.
Yeah, let me respond to that, and then just some additional comments. I see that you're the last speaker in the queue, and I think that we're all in need of a break here. So the professional services contracts, we will bring those to the board next month. You'll have a list. Some of them are still in the works. I'd rather give you a complete list that has some things finalized as close as we can get to it. That's the reason for it not coming this time around, so be looking forward to that. And we're also going to have that conversation with our member agency general managers once the board receives that information. Just some comments in general. One of the things that Director Vespi mentioned, the 2-year rate, I think that's something that we can kick to this general manager, member agency manager work group. We have a 2-year window based on the action this board took last month that puts us out to the end of, I think it's 2027, to take a look at a holistic look at structural changes to the Water Authority's finances. And other things, business model, activities in general. I think that group is the appropriate group. It's the group that should be discussing, potentially a 2-year rate and what that would look like. I also think that that's probably the appropriate place to talk about some of our water supply issues. The general managers in this region are the best equipped to do with that. To address that issue, and I look to bring that to them as well. And I guess just as a general statement, the Water Authority's resource mix, the QSA water, the desal water, I think it's important to put that in context because everything that we do as staff is going to come from direction of the board. And I think a one-off of that is the consideration of what you all are going to be talking about with our financial policy changes, right? It's a very similar example. If you do not want to have the 150 days of cash, for instance, if you want to change financial policies to lower the rate, staff is not going to get out in front of this board and make that recommendation and jeopardize a bond rating. But if the board directs us to do something like that, asks us to look into it, we absolutely will. And I say all of that with background on the Water Authority's resource mix. I think you all know the history here. In 2003, we signed, in some cases, a 110-year agreement with the Imperial Valley. In 2017, after construction of Pure Water, this board re-upped that contract, right? We extended that contract. The Carlsbad desal plant began commercial operations in 2015. So this administration, prior administrations, did not receive input, direction from this board after 2 years of commercial operation of the Carlsbad desal plant to find a way to back out of it. So let's put all of these great thoughts together and let's kick this to the general managers, and I would pose that question to them. Can we work on something to get this region, whether it's Pure Water, it's East County Potable, it's everything in this space that we're all dealing with. Let's develop a roadmap together as opposed to being combative. So that's where I think that should land. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager Dan Denham. I want to just take a quick moment to thank our staff, especially our finance staff. It's not always easy as we are having these conversations. And I think there's no doubt in this room that we have brilliant staff, from Lisa Marie, Liana, Pierce, Chris, and everyone else that's on this team. You guys have been phenomenal. And I think as we continue to have these tough conversations around the structural changes within this agency, we are facing unprecedented challenges. And the challenges are different than the challenges that the authority has faced before. But one thing to kind of keep in mind is for all the member agencies, as we continue as board members to have these conversations, creativity matters, and being able to have outside kind of eyes also matter, because sometimes we can get stuck in doing the same thing over and over again. And so as we're having these conversations, as Dan is having these conversations with the general managers, just remember that we are the Water Authority. It is not separate from our agencies. We are the Water Authority. And what's best for each one of our agencies is best for this for the Water Authority as a whole as well. So thank you all for your passionate comments and engagement. We will take a 10-minute break. If we can come back by 10:45 so we can go through the rest of the agenda, that will be much appreciated. Thank you, and be back here 10:45 on the dot. Thank you. All right, everyone, let's get back into it. The next presentation we're going to have, we already started getting questions. General Counsel's Office. So David is going to take it away.
Chair Abdullahi, if I could make a quick correction to a misstatement that I made in my earlier presentation.
Please.
So Director Leahy had asked how many active projects we would have over the next 2 years, and I responded 200. It's just about 100 projects that we would have active over the next 2 years. So just wanted to correct that for the record. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. With that correction, David, we're going to take away with your presentation next.
Okay. Thank you. So the General Counsel's Office, as you all know, serves as the Chief Legal Officer for the organization. You can go to the next slide. And as part of that, we manage the legal affairs of the Water Authority. So everything from the contracts to CIP disputes to litigation, HR problems, things like that. And as part of that, some of the things that we do you hear about, and many of the things we do you don't hear about. And generally when you don't hear about things, that means things are running on the track. But as part of that, our budget has certain components that we'll discuss here in public, and then there's certain components of the budget that are not disclosed because there's confidential information associated with it. So just as a backdrop, just sort of keep that in mind as we walk through. Next slide. So over the last couple of years, we've had some significant achievements. You all remember, I'm not going to read all these, but you remember what we did with the board governance work group. We're working actively with the State Water Board to try to resolve some fee issues related to San V. But again, the things that are here are the things that are public. You also know that we're actively engaged in negotiating with Metropolitan on settlement. So there's things we talk about publicly, and then there's things we talk about in closed session, and those will remain in closed session. Next slide, please. Again, there's just a lot of inputs to the General Counsel's office. So, for example, you heard a few months ago we were doing some dewatering as part of one of the CIP projects, and we had some public speakers in here talking about potential impacts to their property. We resolve the vast majority of those complaints without litigation and without accepting responsibility on the part of the Water Authority. Director Arant came into our office one day. We had a property owner who had an encroachment permit, was unhappy with some of the work that the Water Authority was doing, and it's our job to try to resolve that without having a lawsuit filed and preserving our rights. So there's a lot of time spent in that capacity. Next slide. So the goal in the next 2 years is the goal of the last 2 years, and that is to continue to manage the Water Authority's legal affairs in a way that minimizes our costs and provides efficient counsel to all the various business entities within the organization. Next slide. So this budget will show, on the next slide when we get there, an overall decrease in legal services. And frankly, that's the one variable within the budget, is the money that we spend on outside lawyers. There have been times, and some of you who've been here for a long time remember that through the Metropolitan litigation, those numbers got really, really big. That's not an issue for us right now, and hopefully we will find resolution to that in short order. We are reducing our legal services by $857,000. That is primarily an elimination of a component of the Brownstein firm's contract. We are increasing our contingency for some of those things that we see on the horizon that hopefully don't come to fruition, but want to be equipped to deal with them if they do. We also absorbed, as you heard earlier, some of HR's legal services budget is now going to live in the General Counsel's budget. And we also gave back $250,000 as part of the midterm budget cut during this budget cycle. And overall, we are about $1.5 million below budget in legal services that were budgeted in the last cycle. So we're way under budget right now for a variety of reasons. And so we can go to the next slide, which will show where we're at and what we're asking for this time. Again, you'll see that legal services is a big component of our budget. Everything else is fixed. We've got 2 admins and an assistant GC and myself. And there are, again, things on the horizon that we want to be prepared for. But the one thing that you will see in the coming months is we'll be bringing some contracts to the board for amendment and extension. And I'll just give an example. At the D-Cell plant, we employ an outside law firm called Hawkins to advise on the amendments to that contract. It's a highly complex agreement, and we've had expert counsel on that, I think, from the inception. So as those contracts, as the money is expended and we get beyond the authority of this office and the general manager's office to employ those lawyers, we'll be bringing those contracts pursuant to the budget numbers to this board for approval, and you'll have a chance to see some of those. The vast majority of our legal services contracts are, generally under $50,000. So they're small. They're used for discrete issues when we need a little expert help. So that's the state of affairs in the GC's office, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from directors? All right, seeing Director Scalzetti.
Thank you for letting me speak on this committee. As I do appreciate cutting some of your budget, just want to make sure that you have some in for future stuff that you see. Obviously, you can't anticipate everything, but it's always harder to come back to ask for more money later. But I do appreciate you doing what you can to minimize the budget in your division. Thank you.
Director Leahy.
Sorry, I'm going to add on to Director Scalzetti, sounds like spaghetti's comment. I agree that I appreciate that we're cutting some things, and I think that's what I would be asking our general manager, chief operating officer, general counsel, is that we're looking at cutting things down as close as we can, and I would actually prefer, in a couple instances maybe here and there, that we are so tight on things because we are being as conservative and efficient and effective as possible, that you do come back and say, hey, we underestimated this one a little bit and we need a little bit of extra money. So that is actually the change in mentality that I would appreciate seeing moving forward. And why I keep stressing this is because we keep seeing our demands are going down, but I don't see that we are changing that mentality. And that is what I am asking and looking for from the three of you, is that is the mentality. And I'd rather see, again, not on a consistent basis, but that we're starting to change that and like, hey man, we cut this a little tight and we do need a little bit extra more to be able to spend and be able to meet the board's needs and the level of services that our customers, our 22 customers, are asking. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Leahy. Director Castaneda.
Thank you very much, and thank you, David. Appreciate it. I appreciate your willingness to sort of sharpen the pencil a little bit. The $350,000 contingency obviously is something that you don't know what's going to happen, but you want to be prepared. What is the process for that in terms of freeing up that money? Is that something that you can just say something walked in the door, you got something, and I'm just going to move money over? Is that something that has to come to the board for approval prior to moving contingency money into your legal services budget?
Yeah, I mean, hypothetically, the way that I would anticipate that going down would be some external event has created a need at the water authority to
No, I know that, but what I'm saying is, what's the process in terms of moving that money over?
No, I'm getting to that.
Yeah, okay,
so
thanks.
I would anticipate that is something that would exceed Dan and I's authority, and so it would come to you in the form of a proposed contract, and you'd be approving a contract that would be paid for by the contingency.
Okay, so wouldn't it be better to remove $350,000 off the books and use reserves if in fact something like that came up, and ask this board to basically move money from an unrestricted reserve into legal services to cover that cost? And what I'm saying is the bottom line would be, instead of $350,000 in new money, that would be $350,000 of existing money that you already have, and it wouldn't change the overall cost, if I sort of understand the way these budgets are constructed.
Well, I think that I guess that would be a policy decision for the board in terms of giving direction on the budget.
Okay, just something to think about. Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Seeing no other questions from Director Plessy.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I'm not on the committee, so I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I'm just wondering, I didn't see, are lobbyists a part of your group or your contracts in this? No. Where are they housed?
In the general manager's
Got it.
budget.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right, any other questions from directors? We'll move on to the next presentation, which is going to be the General Manager's Office. Dan, take it away.
Director Flessy, you couldn't have asked a better question. So let's go to the next slide. So I think you all know the role of the office. It's really kind of split into three pieces. The first piece includes myself, Tish, Jamie, and 2 admins, 5 FTEs total, as it relates to the general manager's executive team. We also have the clerk of the board. That's the clerk and deputy clerk, 2 FTEs. And we also have the government relations division, which is our government affairs manager and a legislative analyst. Just in terms of the clerk of the board, just kind of backtracking a little bit, I think that you all can understand and appreciate that the role of the clerk is to keep the legislative history intact and in conformance with the Brown Act. I would say that that's the primary duty, but also contained in the clerk's budget is the entire budget related to this board of directors. So with that comes per diems, it comes travel, reimbursement, et cetera, those sort of things. Government relations, to Director Flessy's question, government relations covers our legislative policy guidelines. I think you've all seen that. We have an annual update to that and a monthly report out. But it also handles our state and federal advocacy contracts. That's probably one of the primary functions of the government relations department. Let's move on to the next slide, just to hit on some of the accomplishments that we've had over the past couple of years. I think we've all seen the benefit of working together and not in conflict with our neighbors and within our own water authority family in this region. That has brought in $40 million worth of new revenue to this agency, and that's been something that's helped reduce rates by 6%. That only happens because of what I've done is really a new external focus on things. A lot of the direction that I'm headed with relationships, it really is tearing off of the Met litigation and settling the Met litigation going forward. Operating in an environment of collaboration and finding a way to work together is what brought us that $40 million. And I think that going forward, as we try to rebalance our resource mix with the desal plant, with the water transfers, tearing off of the conversation that we just had in the past committee, that's really going to set the stage and be the jump-off point for how we do things going forward here at this agency. Again, tearing off of that last conversation, with the support of board officers, we created a general manager working group. We've only had a handful of meetings, but it's your general managers that are there listening to the detail that we prepare for this board. We're having expansive policy discussions, and I think that that's become a more inclusive group. It's everyone together with a top person from each agency leading those conversations. Next slide, please. So again, I would talk about, or at least focus on this, the external focus, the relationships with civic leaders. The advocacy piece as it relates to our state and federal funding, one thing to highlight is from that Prop 4, $50 million, we were able to bring in $500,000 for Hodges. That's something that benefits everyone in this region. In terms of the federal advocacy contracts themselves, what Jamie and Megan and Daniel were able to do is reorganize those contracts and save the Water Authority $258,000 over this past year, while maintaining the current level of support, or I should say the historical level of support that we've always seen. Legislatively, we're always going to continue to have roundtable discussions with our local elected leaders, and it'd be nice if we could do that more often, but typically we have about two or three a year, and it really largely depends on their schedules and what they're able to when they're able to get here. So moving forward, next slide, please. I think a lot of the same. I really am hopeful that with the negotiations and conversations that we're having with Metropolitan, that we'll be able to bring forward something to you all very soon in the coming weeks on settlement of the Met litigation. It's going to be transformational, I believe, for this region, this water authority, and Southern California. It's going to do some things. It's going to allow us to do some things, some long-term goals that we have about managing our resource mix. I think what you've all heard me say before is that we jumped into the Met litigation, I believe, for all the right reasons. It really did have to do with affordability. It had to do with the Water Authority having a voice at Metropolitan. And in fact, we were able to bring back nearly $100 million that was redistributed to our ratepayers here in San Diego. With that, it came at a cost, and the cost was relationships. And so we're trying to rebuild that, and I think that this board's in a better place than we've ever been with our relationship with Metropolitan. And on a staff-to-staff level, it's always been great, and it's only improved over the past couple of years here. Again, we're going to continue to advocate for state and federal funding, and we're going to continue to look towards low-income rate assistance for this region. I know that that's not exactly a touch point at the wholesale level, but the Water Authority, and I think that what you heard last month, it's going to be very important that a funding source is identified with any kind of low-income assistance program in this region, and we'll continue to keep our eye on the ball for that going forward. Next slide, please. So after I advance this slide, you're going to see there isn't much to the GM's budget, with the exception of the labor and benefits increases that I think that every department, organization-wide, we've seen an uptick in that, and I think that Leanna did a great job explaining why that's occurring. The big piece in terms of the change to the general manager's budget this year is the transfer. Again, I understand the complexity of understanding and finding the roadmap to how all of these different changes are occurring in this organization, but what we have transferred is the professional services component of the Brownstein contract. This is support for the MWD delegates to the general manager's office. So you're going to see that an increase of $1.3 million. It largely represents 48% of the increase in that service category. In one of my responses to Director Freehoff, I said that next month we're going to come back with professional service contracts, and so we'll be able to take a deeper dive on this. This $1.3 million will not stick. We're in the middle of negotiations, and it'll be considerably lower, and so I'll have more to report to you in the weeks moving forward on what that Brownstein contract looks like. Just kind of tearing off of what David already said, the legal services component. It has been zeroed out in terms of the Met litigation. So really what we're talking about is focus and support for the Met program in some form going forward. The other category has increased nominally by roughly $200,000, and again, this just has to do with mileage, travel, and what is candidly this sort of external focus that we've embarked upon here of getting out, talking to people, being seen, giving presentations, and advocating on behalf of this region. Next slide, please. So this is what it looks like overall, 10% increase. Largely, like I said, the 48% is the service transfer in from the Met program, which is the Brownstein services contract. If we can go just to the next slide to kind of cut to the chase, this is what we've been doing all day here. The 10% goes down to 5% when you take out that component of the transfer into the general manager's office. Those are all the highlights I have. I think that if we really want to sort of to get into the weeds on some of this stuff, you can see the supplies, utilities, insurance, et cetera, are relatively nominal compared to the total. But on the other side of things, so the other category, if you'll notice that increase, travel, training, et cetera. And then on the supply side, we're talking about needed upgrades to office equipment and some reconfiguration in the general manager's office. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Director Leahy?
Thank you. Can we go, well, maybe we could stick here. So question on the Brownstein contract, that was $1.3 million. Is that per year, or is that combined for 2 year in this placeholder?
It's a 2 year.
Okay. So we're spending about I'm doing quick head math, which is not my forte, $54,000 a month on delegate support.
That's the carryover from last year. And so that's what we've plugged this time around. And like I said, it will be negotiated down.
Okay. And then I just want to point out to my peers, even though not all of them are here, and I want to say thank you to staff on the fact that I know how much time you have spent on this presentation and how much time we're spending in this room here yesterday and today. And I apologize that our side of this room is not as populated as your side. So thank you, and I am sorry that we don't have more attendance from my peers as we should, because this is an important conversation. So I do want to point out to my peers here and not that one single contract represents 10% of our general manager's budget, or over 10%. And $50,000 a month on that support effort is probably more than we're spending in any other category in this agency. So I would look forward to having that conversation further and seeing that number drastically decrease. Thank you.
Vice Chair Arendt?
At the end of the Afghanistan war, there was a lot of discussion about the peace dividend, and hopefully we're going to see a peace dividend with our relationship with Metropolitan. That combined with the fact that we now have a greater degree of organization and expertise with respect to Metropolitan within our own organization should result in a positive outcome. So thank you.
Director Pong Sakai?
Thank you very much, and I do appreciate all the work that staff has put into doing these presentations yesterday and for today. Regarding the Brownstein contract, I think it's a good thing that we're moving it over to the general manager's office. It probably is going to be a better fit rather than having it in legal. And with that, I do want to say that I greatly appreciate, especially being a Met delegate, that we have someone of the caliber of Chris Fromm with Brownstein as one of our advisors. She has been a chair here. She's been a vice chair up at Metropolitan, and she has significant depth and history and understanding as to things that have transpired between here in San Diego County Water Authority and also at Metropolitan, and she knows a lot of people and how to get things done. So one of the reasons that our delegates look good up there is because of our incredible staff here, many of who are in the gallery that help prep us, get us ready, give us the understanding and background as to all the issues that are coming up, that will be coming up, but also for Chris Fromm and her team. So we are better and stronger and smarter because of this entire team, and that includes Brownstein. So that's just my bit. Thank you.
All right, I don't see any other speakers on queue. Chair Serrano?
Thank you. First off, I want to, in this second part of our day, I want to join my colleague, Director Leahy, in saying thank you to all of the Water Authority staff for all of the work that you've put in to get us to today, and for the time that you are spending here with us to help educate perhaps and inform about what's in this new budget. I know that it takes a lot of work, and so I just wanted you all to know that you have my sincere thanks and appreciation for that. I also want to, in this budget, really uplift the fact and, I think thank our GM, but more specifically our AGM, for the work that she has done to bring down our lobbying contracts. That figure that you saw in the presentation, I think, is a very significant figure. It's also in response to the years that this board, or in recent years, this board has asked to see that type of renegotiation, a relook perhaps. So Jamie, thank you for all of your work in that. I definitely appreciate it. And I know from experience that we are still very well served in Washington, D.C., and I believe that's going to be true next week when we go to Sacramento as well, because our lobbyists there are in the right spaces. And I think as you see in the reports that we get monthly from them, they are definitely connected, know what's going on, and have our interests in mind. So I appreciate that. I did want to touch on the contracted support for MWD delegates. As you heard, the general manager has been hopefully negotiating that contract. It is my interest, and I want specifically the MWD delegates to hear it from me. I want to make sure that our MWD delegates are supported at MET, have what they need in order to be effective at MET on our behalf. And I will caveat that by just saying, with the hopeful settlement negotiations completed, with detachment being a done deal, I have thoughts about that. With that being done, though, I think it does merit just a full wholesale look at this contract and perhaps a reduction in service. So I think we're just at a place where we need to just reanalyze what that means. But my interest is still making sure that all of the delegates have what they need in order to be successful at MET. The question for the general manager and myself and the board officers right now is just what does that look like on a go-forward basis? We don't want to take our foot off the gas pedal in terms of the support that in terms of what you guys have been able to accomplish at MET, and because we know that there's a lot more ahead. So I wanted to make that point. Lastly, on the travel budget, I've been very clear since I became chair that I wanted to see a reduction in the number of people that we are sending to conferences and events. I will tell you that during, I think, one trip to Sacramento, there were 8 board members or something like that went on a trip, and that was not under this administration, but a prior one. And it was overkill because we couldn't even fit in the office. So in this, I think on similar trips, there were 6 board members. So I would just tell you, in this last trip to Washington, D.C., we only had 3 board members go. And I think that's a substantial reduction, and you're going to see that continually going forward. I think on this trip to Sacramento, there's only 2 board members that are going. So apologies to all of you, but that is a priority of mine, is to limit the amount of board members that are attending. Again, it's just all money that's being spent. So again, I appreciate the general manager, the AGM, and her willingness to do that, and appreciate all of you being patient with that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Serrano. Director Leahy?
Sorry, I had one more question to our general manager. You know, last month, actually, it wasn't even last month, it was last week. Last week at our board meeting, we had a great presentation from our MWD MET staff, or I guess our imported water staff is our new department name. And so my question to you is, do you feel like we have the expertise, the knowledge, the personal connections, and the understanding of the imported water program on existing staff and in-house to be able to support our delegates?
I do believe that we have the ability to do that. If to put it a different way, if you're asking, do the delegates need the support of the Brownstein firm? I think that the level of service is just a little bit different, right? Between myself and Mina and the rest of the staff, we are steeped in MET history. We're steeped in Water Authority history. But it's just a matter of the direction that we want to head as a delegation going forward and what that level of service looks like. We do have a number of staff members that are coming into their own and learning. So that's what I would say.
Perfect, thank you. And I would agree, and I tried to make those comments earlier. I know I'm not very great at sometimes saying those things, but tried to make them last week, tried to make them again earlier. Like, I do have full confidence that our staff have the knowledge and expertise in order to conduct these efforts. And just like I have said in past meetings, I'm aware that no other agencies do not have similar support contracts, and they also don't have dedicated departments in order to manage their other water wholesalers or other member agencies' work efforts. So I appreciate that we have that in-house, and that I have full confidence that we can continue to do that and support the delegates the way they need, perhaps by lowering some outside assistance. Thank you.
Director Scalzetti?
Thank you once again for letting me speak on topic. Just wanted to give Helix kind of version of where we hope to see some of those litigation and some of those expertise limiting at the MET delegate services. And I, too, am pretty confident that we have competent staff for some of those MET challenges, whether they're legal or not. But was hoping and thought we had more discussion is this board would be more in touch with some of those things that the happening at Met, so we would be able to give guidance and what we want as their delegates or our representatives to this board. And maybe if we don't have as much legal things and complicated legal, that our board would be more engaged in some of the directions that the delegates would have, and it would help a lot of our board members get more in touch and educated on our Met issues up there. So I'm hoping that transitions here in the future. Thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone. We are going to move on from this issue for right now. All the directors who wanted to speak have spoken. In the interest of time, we have a few more agenda items to get through, and 11:30 is right around the corner. Before we move on to the next presentation, I just kind of want to get a quick temperature check from directors. If folks are okay with extending an additional hour and being here, or rescheduling it for the tentative meeting that we already had scheduled for May 6th. Is there any objections if we're able to kind of push through some of the remaining agenda items?
Will there be lunch?
If you,
This is a depends on if you want
if
to
it's
cut
the
down
pleasure
the
of
money.
this board, I can order pizzas and salad. That's about as quick as.
All right, so there will be lunch. You will get your pizzas and salad. So if we could push through,
Wait, will or will not?
I just want to get a temperature check. So
right.
if we can, I just want to see if there's any opposition to being able to push through the agenda. Because you're here, staff is here. All right, we can push through. That's how committed y'all are. Great. So we'll let staff take care of the food, lunch, and we'll push through the rest of the agenda. Thank you all so much. So Catherine, take it away for Human Resources.
Good morning, members of the board. I'll be providing a quick overview of the draft recommended HR operating budget for the upcoming budget cycle. In the effort to save some time, I won't necessarily read all the way through the department overviews, but maybe we could pop over to the accomplishments. I'd like to highlight just a few accomplishments that the HR team achieved during the budget cycle while continuing to deliver critical day-to-day services for our employees and the organization during this budget cycle. The HR team negotiated and implemented a new MOU between the Water Authority and Teamsters. The HR team continued to promote San Diego Water Works, which is a resource for all of our member agencies. We attended several outreach opportunities to promote and bring visibility to the water industry as a whole. And the HR team also launched and completed or concluded the pilot professional development coaching program for Water Authority and member agency employees. During the upcoming budget cycle, the HR department's focused on advancing initiatives that continue to build on engaging a high-performing workforce team that's well-positioned to meet both current and future needs of the organization. A few initiatives include, again, preparing and commencing labor negotiations, researching, recommending wellness and benefit offerings for our employees, continuing to assess how technology solutions can help streamline our business processes and standardize practices. We will also be implementing and transitioning to an electronic personnel filing system in 2025. We will also be further developing and enhancing our outreach military activities, looking for military who are ready to transition out and hopefully come into the water industry. Now I'll highlight our proposed budget modifications, or recommended, modifications. Last year in 2024, we had 2 staffing changes. We downgraded the HR manager position to a principal human resources analyst position, and then we also upgraded a human resource analyst to a senior analyst. Our non-personnel expenses are proposed to decrease overall by about $120,000, which is 13% across all budget categories. This decrease is primarily due to the transfer of the legal services budget to the General Counsel's office. and the conclusion of the pilot program. It does include HR software modifications to improve efficiency, transparency, and delivery of service. Thank you. Our supplies category is decreasing by about $21,000 just based on past spending trends. Our insurance and warranty are increasing by $2,500, and that's to account for the increase in unemployment claims. There's a nominal decrease in our lease and rent category due to not renting space. The other expense category is proposed to increase by almost $35,000. This is primarily due to the realignment of training related to staff to address emerging legislative changes and ensure that we continue to attract and develop and retain a high-performing workforce to carry out our mission. As you can see from the chart presented, the overall draft recommended HR budget is proposed to increase by $245,000. If we compare the HR budget to last year, taking out the transfer of $150,000 to the General Counsel's office, we're looking at an increase of about $395,000. So with that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer questions. Hopefully I gave you enough information.
Thank you. We have one question. Director Roback?
Yes.
So I've been trying to figure out the best time to talk about this.
Sure.
And so we've talked, peppered throughout all of the presentations are discussions of, how many FTEs in a department. So now I've been at OTI for 20 years now, and during that time we've decreased, staffing quite a bit to the point where we have, from a retail agency standpoint, the fewest number of employees per customer. So, which is a very useful metric. And the way we've been able to do that is by people retire, and we didn't have any people laid off or anything. We basically, as people retired, we combined jobs. Things that weren't our core mission. At the agency, we like maybe landscaping or something. Certain IT services we contracted out. I know I'm obviously new here on the board. I know one of the big things I've been following over the years is a effort to look at the agency, and this has been talked about a lot too. How do we spend money more wisely? And I guess that's been shifted to the general managers forum. And as the general manager said today, we're looking at, they've had a couple of meetings, and I know that's one of the things they're looking at is how to better economize. So I know this is something you can't really answer, and you're relatively new here yourself. Like, what about a year or so?
Yes, I began with the Water Authority in December 23.
Right, but so it's a mindset on how you spend money, and it's, I'd like to, I'll just speak for our agency. We spend it like it's our own money, and I'm not suggesting that you guys don't do that, but and I guess it's more of a statement than a question. That whatever form this takes, a combination of the board and the general manager's input over the next, Dan, you said next couple of years? Is that what I heard you say?
Yeah, we have a deadline of 2027, end of 27 as it relates to the rate structure design.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So, but we're talking, but the overall thing too is fiscal sustainability, and that's really what I'm talking about. So, again, so it's not really a question, but more of a kind of where we're going, what we should be doing. Looking at, the affordability of water, which is like everything in San Diego, is just out of hand. So we need to be, using that metric and analyzing everything we do, is spending it again as like it was our own money. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other speakers on queue. Thank you so much, Catherine. We'll move on to the next presentation with Mina for imported water.
Well, I don't want to stand between you guys and lunch, so I'm going to try to go through this really quickly. Good morning, Chair and esteemed board members. I'm very excited today to talk to you about how we have taken deliberate, efficient, forward-thinking measures to reduce costs while maintaining the high level of services that you expect. You'll recall at the beginning of the year, our general manager made the decision to combine the Colorado River program and the Metropolitan Water District program into one department, now referred to as the Imported Water Department. This strategic move aligned our regional outreach, enhanced our regional collaboration, and placed our strategic interagency advocacy under one roof. It also enhanced efficiency by eliminating duplication and strengthening our voice at Metropolitan and with our river partners, ensuring that our region's water supply goals are represented with greater clarity, coordination, and impact. The Imported Water Department manages and supports delivery of reliable imported water into the San Diego region. Our key responsibilities include overseeing the imported water planning and delivery of that water, administering the long-term contracts related to the quantification settlement agreement, working with Imperial Irrigation District and Metropolitan Water District, and coordinating with state, federal, and regional agencies. So that despite experiencing the climate whiplash that we have in the last couple years, we were able to maintain our imported water supply reliability. We also worked very hard this year to develop new partnerships with a variety of state water project contractors and Central Valley interested partners. Ultimately, we've developed new opportunities to utilize our out-of-region storage assets. Excellent. Our efforts also included successfully advocating strategies to mitigate rising imported water costs from our water wholesaler, strengthening collaborations with Metropolitan, its member agencies, and IID. We've been able to optimize the opportunities to do water exchanges and transfers, which this board has actively called for. We've been supporting our Metropolitan Water delegates in their board leadership roles, and we have successfully leveraged our out-of-region storage assets, generating about $2.8 million in revenue over the last 2 fiscal years. As we look ahead, the future of imported water is facing critical challenges, from climate-driven supply uncertainty to aging infrastructure that moves that water into our region to regulatory impacts that are out of our control. These pressures underscore the need to stay the course so that we have more of a certain future and so that our region isn't vulnerable to these unpredictable and often uncontrollable circumstances. We'll continue to support our board on the Colorado River Board of California and their representatives in engaging in the post-2026 guidelines development with the understanding that those guidelines are expected to be developed at the end of this 2 fiscal years. We will be working hard to ensure that those guidelines include flexible management strategies, including interstate and intrastate water transfers and exchanges, so that we can develop the innovative strategies that your board is calling for. Along those lines, we'll also work with our California partners to protect the state's senior priority rights and encourage innovative programs throughout the development of those new guidelines. This long-term management effort will also include developing opportunities to augment the Colorado River or enhance our out-of-region partnerships with available desalination supplies in a way that best serves our region's needs without losing the sight of affordability. We'll continue to support the Water Authority's delegates serving in the Metropolitan Board leadership roles. We'll ensure strong regional representation in policy and planning decisions that impact us, and we'll continue to collaborate with parties to align water management efforts and policies throughout California and the Southwest. So this year, as we look at our newly combined budget, there were some modifications to note. Under personnel changes, we've strengthened our organizational efficiency by merging the Colorado River and MET programs into one department under one director. And I know, Director Lee, that gets a little confusing. I started my role in the general manager's office, and then I've moved into the Colorado River or the Imported Water Committee. So I know it gets confusing if you don't have the slides side by side. But this actually ended up with a net zero impact to the organization. Our outside services in my department have moved over to the general manager's department, as was recently talked about. But we did have some other expenses increase slightly because we anticipate that the Colorado River Board costs are going to go up proportionately. And then we had some operational costs, my travel a little bit as I work around the Southwest and have some of these meetings. So in closing, the imported water budget reflects the expenses of securing and managing our reliable water supplies, ensuring our long-term stability, and we will continue to provide a cost-effective service. Overall, our department's facing a mere 6% increase. So thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mina. We have a question, Director Freehoff, followed by Director Rollback.
Great. Thank you, Mina, for the presentation. I guess a comment and then a question. I do think you have one of the biggest challenges here at the Water Authority in regards to looking at opportunities for us to maximize the benefit of the water that we have, that limited amount of water that we have that we're able to sell, and the challenges associated with doing that. I think when you look at the pie chart, as far as our expenditures, we know that treatment and water purchases is our biggest expenditure. And so I think it is just key that we look at ways to, again, I know we don't like to say monetize, but to take those assets that we have and really benefit to the benefit of our ratepayers. And so I'm hoping, I don't want you to have any, we don't need to hire more staff or more consultants, but I'm really hoping that this organization really prioritizes that effort, because I think that is going to be so important. And so where you can bring in staff from other departments to help you in this, I think is going to be key. So even though it's just one bullet item on there, I truly think that it is one of the most important things at our organization right now. So good luck. but I support you in that. And then I have a question, and this is regarding the office we have at Metropolitan. And I know that we are one of the furthest member agencies away from Metropolitan's headquarters, but do any other of the Met member agencies have an office there?
They do not. And I've been in discussions with our general manager about closing down that office. And I've also been in contact with Metropolitan about hosting like a hotel style opportunity for not just a San Diego County Water Authority, but MODOC, Eastern. We all go in there and we work for the day, and we need access to a printer, and we'd like, sometimes we have conference calls that we need to take, and they've been amenable to that. They think it's a really great idea. So if they had like a suggestion box, I win this month. They like the idea of us having a hotel space so that, a bunch of us can go in there and work when we need to and have access to that. They also have a hybrid work schedule, so there's a lot of open space that they have in their building. They'd like to see that be maximized better.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, because not only then we no longer need to rent a space, but it would lend to collaboration.
Correct.
If you've got all the staff there spending time between committees or something, I think that could foster a lot of coordination. So, yeah, I appreciate that. Hopefully that works out.
Thank you. Yeah, it's better than sitting in their cafeteria.
Yeah, thank you for the time.
Director Rollback?
So, Mina, I was thinking about, the old saying, S rolls downhill, and that's one of the big things we're talking about here with, the Met with some just gigantic rate increases, which I think not only speaks to aging infrastructure, but it speaks to, I don't think really minding that store very well is either, in terms of fiscal sustainability. Met, that is. I think a good example of that, in terms of, again, not to use a lot of, old sayings, but spending money like a drunken sailor, what the Met did with, the former GM, I'm talking about Jeff Keitlinger, and spending the money on the Delta Islands, which was just crazy. I don't think there's any better way to characterize that without a intended purpose. I think some of the things like, the Pure Water program up in LA, which I think is, in my personal opinion, not well advised. So it's a statement more than anything, because we're really talking about big numbers here. I can't think of anything more important than just really good fiscal oversight, and I think that's the gentleman, Tim Smith, that had my seat previously, was trying to do, is bring some better financial discipline to Met. So is there any kind of thing like they're doing at Met, like they're doing with the general manager's office here at the Water Authority right now in terms of fiscal sustainability for Met?
So I have two thoughts to this. First of all, our delegates work very hard to maintain Met's increases, and they're actively working on everything that Met puts forward to make sure that those costs are limited. But what I don't think we've talked about much in this boardroom is the value of our QSA supplies. Is it actually stops us from being reactive to those rates at Met. We don't buy water from Met. So a lot of the costs that are being incurred or thought about at Metropolitan, we've actually isolated ourselves from. We have a contract that has been able to supply our region with reliable water supply, and I'll add to that it's a valuable asset because it's high priority Colorado River water, and Met and Arizona are going to have to make severe cuts in 2027 as we look at post-2026. And so we've isolated ourselves by having these transfer agreements and the desal plant, that those costs that are going to happen at Met, projected to happen at Met, won't impact us in the way that you would, that we're fearing in some ways. And I think that's why previous boards have taken the actions that they have. And once settlement gets into place, we'll be further protected for those big rate hikes that Metropolitan is facing.
Okay, what about their fiscal sustainability? Is there a concerted effort on that?
Yes. They're also going through a business model program. They're looking at everything. They're looking at trying to sell water outside of their area. Our directors, again, are working really hard with them to kind of go through a process that really evaluates the need of what Metropolitan is trying to spend. We're anticipating spending. And so I think that we're doing everything we can from our end to manage those costs, but again, we're pretty isolated from most of them.
All right, Director Ponce-Sakai.
Thank you very much. And Mina, thank you so much for the presentation. I really appreciate it, and you're sharing your insight also, having been both a part of our Water Authority and also at Metropolitan. I just want to piggyback onto your comments and also the question from Director Robeck, is that regarding getting the deal between Metropolitan and San Diego County Water Authority, that helps stabilize us, and if and when it's done, I'm hoping that we will be isolated from all of the transportation costs that could be coming down the line. So perhaps we'll be insulated from that. But all of the delegates are still very much aware that as representatives for the Water Authority, but also for Metropolitan, that we have a fiduciary responsibility to both organizations. So even though San Diego County Water Authority may be insulated from costs that could occur because of decisions that are made at Metropolitan, we still want to make sure that Metropolitan is still in sound financial shape, because all of the agencies need Metropolitan to be in good shape so that we can all be in good shape also. What affects them affects all of us. So that's something that's always top of mind to all of us.
Thank you so much, Director Ponce-Sakai. I don't see any other questions. So thank you so much, Mina, and you went through that really fast. So really, really appreciate that. All right, next we have Eva, who's going to give us the presentation on the operations and maintenance.
Good morning, chairs, committee members, and board members. And I'm going to go very quickly through the O&M budget. So please, if you need me to slow down, let me know. So first is who are we? We operate and maintain the aqueduct system, and we are 40% of the operating budget. So we're like the biggest chunk of all the departments you've seen here. And to give you a perspective of what we do, currently we are in a shutdown of the complete untreated system for the water authority. So all our member agencies who take untreated water for us, they had to either go offline and go onto our treated source or find different water sources. So I was walking through the yard and I saw the bolts that our team is using. So over there you have the size of the bolts that we use, and that represents as representative of the size of the facilities that we have to work with. So everything that we do is huge and oversized, and to manage that and maintain it and repair it, we have a team of 90.5 FTEs divided into 12 different cost centers that you see there. Our biggest cost center is system operations, and that has about 17 employees. 2/3 of our cost centers are associated with maintenance, and the rest are just miscellaneous tasks like administrative support. And actually our asset management that you heard Martin speak during yesterday, that is only about 10% of our budget. So all these facilities that we have to do and maintain, we did that the last 2 years, and we had some very stellar accomplishments. One of the biggest accomplishments that I'm very proud of, we maintain an almost 100% uptime of the aqueduct system. We only had a 2-day unscheduled emergency shutdown on the untreated Pipeline 5. That's for the whole 2 years, 700 and some days of operations. That's a huge achievement, and that's because we take our maintenance and repair very seriously, and we do this day in and day out. And for those of you who remember, that was the 4th of July weekend last year, and it affected 3 of our member agencies. It affected about 400,000 people. So we are very cognizant that what we do has tremendous impacts. So I have 2 slides on our accomplishments. You have them in your pocket. You can read them at your leisure, and I'll be happy to have one-on-one conversations about the rest of our accomplishments. But the board also gave us 4 positions last budget cycle. So I have the next 3 slides at the request of our E&O chair to go over those positions. So the board gave us a SCADA specialist position because we showed the biggest need. We did a analysis of the tasks that all the work orders, the tasks that that group has versus how many staff we had, and we had about a 6,000 hours discrepancy between work that needed to be done and the staff that we had. And we asked for only 1 position because we had some other plans to combine some groups within O&M. So that position has been in place for over a year, and we've seen some specific achievements and general benefits that are listed in your packet. And we also have some additional conversation on SCADA, which during our closed session next month on cybersecurity, so we can get a little bit more into that. The other position that we filled was a position that was discontinued during the COVID time, so we reestablished that position in our asset management group, and you see here the specific achievements and the general benefits we achieved from that position since we filled it in November of 2023. In the maintenance department, we filled got 2 positions, and we also filled them very quickly. And I would say this was 2 positions that we eliminated as part of the 2008 budget procedure. So now we filled it again many years later. And what we noticed, the biggest achievement here is what we noticed was an improvement in our shutdown execution. When we are able to finish shutdowns even a few hours early, that means our member agencies can get water a few hours early. So those 2 positions have been key for us. So in terms of our initiatives for the next 2 years, our primary goal and purpose is to operate and maintain the aqueduct system, and that is what we're going to focus on. And when we build our budget, we build our budget from the ground up. We assumed nothing from the previous history, and we looked at the system and we said, what do we need? We practice predictive maintenance, which means we do not necessarily look and say, oh, you should replace this in 3 years. We do complete condition assessments. We evaluate every asset and we say, do we need to replace it? Do we think we're going to need to replace it? Keep in mind, we're doing 2-year budgeting, right? So there's a lot of predictions that have to happen for 2 years. So The team does a tremendous effort, and I really want to commend all 90.5 FTEs that we have for treating it like it is their own money, because they look at everything and they say, do we need to replace it? Will it last another 2 years? Right? And that's what they do every day, in and out. So in addition to that, we know we have to move into our new O&M facility, so we're doing tenant improvement design right now, and we need to sell our existing facility. Next slide, please. Oh, I got it. Okay. So in terms of how did our budget change, right? We 24-25 fiscal years, we had a budget of about 51 million and change. So you heard previous presentations about 1.6 million was moved into O&M to the transfer of the 1 FTE and everything that is associated with maintaining and running this building and these grounds. So that is an increase. We also have an increase in terms of cost shares. Our cost shares with our member agencies, we have 2 cost shares. One is with the City of San Diego, one is with Helix for the Helix treatment, the lead treatment plan. Those went up about 1.6 million. We also had a deferred shutdown in 2023. Unfortunately, one of our member agencies could not secure water for 10 days, so we had to defer that shutdown to this fiscal year, and we're working with that agency to make sure that they have sufficient water, and that deferment was about 1.2 million. We also have temporary costs because our O&M facility will require, we're basically paying double for the same costs until we move. So once we move the security and the double utilities, and that will go away, and that's about $600,000. So you see some other small items here. The other thing that I'm very proud of our team, we've faced tremendous pressures in our service contracts. Keep in mind, we're big. We use specialized services, and we were looking 10-15% increases across our service contracts, which substantially exceed inflation. So we invested in training our existing staff, and where we could with training, we cut those services by $1.5 million. So you will see in the next slide, our services actually increased by quite a bit, but they would have been substantially more if we didn't make that investment in training to be able to decrease those services by $1.5 million. So you've seen this slide with everybody else. We are asking for fiscal year 26-27 a total budget of $63.3 million. That's a $22 million increase. And a substantial part of that increase is, like it was mentioned through, Leanna mentioned, is just labor costs, our PERS costs, and the MOU implementation. The non-labor costs are going by about 26%, and big chunk of it is what I've discussed in the previous slide, and you can see that our services is our biggest component, increase about 55%. And if we didn't reorganize and accept and take on the maintenance of this facility for administrative services, we would have been slightly lower at 61 million. But in my opinion, it makes sense for O&M to wear maintenance. This facility needs maintenance, so it was the right decision from the GM's office to reorganize. So that concludes my fast speed talking presentation. I don't think I've beat any auctioneers, but I've tried. So I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Eva. We have a few questions. Director Leahy, and then Director Freehoff, and then Director Fong-Sakai.
Thank you. I see on slide 82 we have a zero emissions fleet study for the CARB regulations. Does this budget also include purchasing of zero emission fleet vehicles at this time, or where's that?
So that aspect of it is in our ERF presentation. That's coming up, but we do not forecast any vehicle purchases. We are doing this study because we need to prepare and see, for the next budget cycle, where we're going to need chargers and so forth. My hope is that there's legislation that is successful, that we will be classified as emergency vehicles and all goes away. But, to be prudent and be prepared, we're actually in the process of doing that study. It will be finished next budget cycle.
Okay, so that was where my comment was going to go with pending legislation SB 496. I think that would potentially classify majority of your vehicles as emergency vehicles and not needing to be zero emission, except for maybe our general manager's vehicle. I'm going to see you driving around in a Volt, but sorry. But so I would actually advocate that we consider waiting, because that might change the results of your study until that legislation. I know it's made it through 2 committees. I think it's on its way to 3. It's been unanimously approved to date, and it's got a lot of support. So I just don't want us to do an effort and have results that aren't applicable to what the upcoming regulations are potentially. So just to make sure we're not spending the money twice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Freehoff?
Great, thank you. Not on your committee. Eva, I want to thank you and your staff for the amazing job you do in ensuring that our region has a reliable water supply. I mean, I mentioned that I think Mina's job is really important to our organization as far as securing, some transfers or exchanges. I want to say I think all the departments are necessary. But I always say that O&M is one of the most important, because what it comes down to is making sure the water is going through those pipes. So I really appreciate you and your staff. And I was really pleased to hear your efforts to decrease your service contracts by trying to, have your existing staff learn that, learn the skills, so they don't have to contract, those services out. And so this is something that's going to play out in this next budget cycle, correct? Correct? Okay. So, Dan, I have a request from you. What I'd like to see in the next slide, and I think this would be important not only for the board, but for the public, and our ratepayers, to see a slide of all those kind of cost control or cost-saving measures that you are implementing in this coming budget. I just think that would be that's the first slide you show, is here's what we're doing to control costs. And I don't want it to be we're going to secure grants, because I know that's something you bring up all the time, but I want to see, what each department, what the organization is doing. And I know it's small compared, and there's a lot of costs are outside of our control, and I know it's small as part of that expenditure budget, but every little bit helps, and I think it's more just demonstrating to our ratepayers that we are trying to control our costs wherever we can. So I would appreciate, and you can use the example that Eva mentioned, for that's one that stood out to me. So I appreciate that.
Great suggestion.
Thank you.
We can do it.
Director Arendt?
Yeah, to extend the comments from Director Leahy concerning the CARB and the All Clean Fleets rule, even though some of the legislation is still at issue, we still have to monitor that, and we still have to stay engaged in it. And also, we need to stay engaged, because once the bill is passed, it will go into a regulatory process with the State Water, the Air Resources Control Board. And so maybe not a full study, but we need to have provision to stay with that process to make sure it comes out correctly. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Pong-Sakai?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Eva, regarding the new Operations and Maintenance Center, can you remind us of the timeline of construction and when we expect to be moving into it?
So the new the timeline, we're currently in a tenant improvement design. The board authorized that contract in January. So we anticipate finishing design and going for permits sometime this fall. We anticipate permit process to take 6 to 9 months. So we would be advertising for construction sometime in the spring of next year. And then the board, that would come in front of the board for award in the early summer of 2026, with construction ending in the summer, a year later, in the summer of 2027, and move occurring at that time.
Okay. And then just to reiterate, once we are complete with the construction and we move into the new operations center, then we'll be selling the old property, and that would help offset a lot of our costs.
Correct. We have a couple interested parties right now that we're talking to. So we are hopeful that in the next few months we'll be bringing some negotiations in front of the board to actually maybe sell it even before we in a quick time frame.
Okay. And then once we move into the new space, we won't have to rent that space from the transportation company across the street for storage of our vehicles anymore also.
You know what? Actually, as a cost-saving measure, we because that lease was ending this past March, we chose not to renew that lease, and it's a little bit more travel time for staff, but we moved some of our equipment to different locations. And some of it we moved to our Levenheim Reservoir because we have quite a bit of space there. But it just means in the morning, depending what they need, they got to drive a bit further to go get it. So it's a little bit loss of efficiency, but it saves us time, and we don't have to go through the process of renewing that lease.
All right, excellent. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much, Eva. And folks, we're almost there. There's no more questions. There's one more. Director Norman.
Thank you. I just have a question regarding this facility. What's the life history plan for this building? Are we staying here like this and not moving in to Escondido, maintaining two separate facilities?
Yeah, I think the general response to that is the Escondido facility wasn't sized to accommodate the staff here in Kearney Mesa, and so we currently have no plans to move out of this facility. Yeah.
It seems, when I come in, and maybe I just don't see the people except when they're in the audience. It just seems like this building's quiet. And are there a lot of people working in here? I see the cars.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the doors are locked, so you can't get back to the offices. But we do have a hybrid work schedule. So perhaps you're seeing some of that.
Director Leahy.
Sorry, I know you're giving me eyes about not wanting me to speak anymore. I would want to just make sure that although the operations building was not intended for additional office space, that we're not using it also as a garage and parking vehicles overnight. And if there is potential for a hotel type space for remote workers when they're in the office, that we're considering that, and again, going back to efficient, effective, looking at whatever those options are to lower our overhead costs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director Leahy. And so with no other questions in queue, we'll move on to the next presentation with Mike on public affairs.
Well, good morning. I can still say morning, though we're getting close here. Like my colleagues, I'm going to synopsize some of my remarks out of respect for your time, but I do also want to make sure that you have a full understanding of what public affairs does, because I think some of those things are often not well understood. The department itself is directly connected to the general manager's vision that has been talked about here today in terms of creating a more collaborative relational organization through enhancing trust, educating stakeholders, developing mutually beneficial relationships, fostering transparency, communicating this board's priorities to stakeholders, and soliciting feedback, among other goals. Oops, one too many. Here we go. The Public Affairs Department, as I like to think of it, really works in three main buckets or tranches. One is supporting member agencies. We'll talk a little bit about that. In addition, we support virtually all of the other departments across the Water Authority. And then third is the component that you probably think about most when you think about public affairs, which is regional stakeholder engagement, communication, outreach, education, and we'll show some examples of that as well. Organizationally, the department is divided into two teams. We have a stakeholder outreach team that does a lot of the infrastructure-related work, the water academies, media, and related work. And then we have the regional communications team, which provides a lot of the professional services, writing, graphic design, photography, event planning, and so on that support, again, member agencies and the Water Authority staff itself. We're going to look at a few accomplishments for the past couple years because I do think that they're instructive for the next few years. This budget is designed to maintain and become more efficient, not to expand our workspace, if you will, with one exception that you've already heard about in terms of the transfer of the FTE for the receptionist position, which will show up on the final slides. I know you all know about the Water Academy. I won't go into detail about that, but I think there are a couple things that that often get overlooked. One is that really is a service to member agencies and all the other departments in the Water Authority in two ways. It educates stakeholders, and it also educates employees, both Water Authority and member agency employees, about this strange world that we work in called the water industry. And we just had 45 or so employees go through that program this month. In addition, we had another group of civic and business leaders that went through that. In the fall, we will hit 1,000 civic and business leaders going through the Water Academy, which is really an extraordinary accomplishment, and I think is a rising tide for all of us in terms of education of our ratepayers. In terms of CIP outreach, we've talked in this boardroom over the past year plus about the increase in the First Aqueduct outreach and the need there. I think the most important thing that I can mention with regard to that is it has been very intensive, and it will continue to be. And every call, every email that we handle internally, every field meeting, and there can be dozens of these communications with single homeowners, residents, businesses, every one of those is a call, an email meeting that is not coming to host member agencies. And so that is a benefit to the entire region. The Water News Network, I know you're familiar with, but you may not understand the background of that, which is that over the past decade or so, there's been a severe contraction of the regional media, and it's very difficult to get any attention for what you might call good news stories, accomplishments, et cetera. The Water News Network provides an outlet for member agency news and information that otherwise, frankly, wouldn't exist. We share that news and information with 40,000 followers on various platforms, and at least once a month I get a kind note from one of our member agencies about the work that we've done to spotlight their efforts. Media events, we do occasionally. Just this month, we hosted virtually every station and outlet in the region to talk about one of this board's priorities, which is selling water, as well as the water supply reliability, and that's a conversation that we increasingly are driving across the region. A few other accomplishments that I think are instructive going forward. We've spent a lot more time and energy over the past 12, 14 months on workforce development. That is something that is important to every member agency in terms of the silver tsunami and making sure that we have we have a replacement process and are fostering the next generations of leaders. We do that with a partnership with the County Office of Education that I'll hit on in a moment, and regional outreach in the form of value of water outreach. You can see some examples on the slides in both English and Spanish. This is something that will be taking center stage here in May during Water Awareness Month. You're going to see a lot more of that through advertising and other outreach that we're doing across the region. Again, a benefit not only to the Water Authority but to member agencies as well. So if we look a little bit at the 2026-27 initiatives supporting member agencies, I'll back up. Developing and implementing regional outreach and communications initiatives. That is a high priority. By the way, I should mention these are all taken from the committee work plan. So, we're seeking and following that direction. Continuing our water academies on the current pace. Engaging with the member agencies, supporting them in various ways, including the JPIC meetings that we hold each month, offering special training and outreach promotional items, as well as these outreach campaigns. Elevating the Water Authority's role in the community as a collaborator and convener. You see on the bottom right there a picture of a recent forum that we held in Escondido. This was Water Academy alumni, and we were able to bring together 70 alumni to listen to a presentation by the city of Escondido about their water recycling program, and then we had further discussions about the regional response to fires that had just happened in Los Angeles. I mentioned the County Office of Education program and our workforce development efforts. Those kids on the screen are holding up what we call career cards. We developed those over the past year with the County Office of Education, which brings several thousand students from around the region to their Linda Vista Innovation Center just down the road here. And they particularly focus on serving schools in low-income communities with the goal of reducing kids living in poverty. And we are building a water workforce pipeline as part of that effort, getting water industry careers planted in the minds of these young kids as they start their journeys toward professional livelihoods. Finally, I'm just going to mention here that we do provide support across all the different departments. Most of the publications that you see come through public affairs at some level for writing, editing, photography, graphic design, annual reports, business plan, handouts like the Nifty 50, the Water Talk, Dan's periodic outreach to stakeholders, et cetera. Those are all produced with and by the public affairs staff. So if we look at our fiscal year 26-27 modifications, as noted, the transfer, the largest impact to our budget is this transfer. Again, no net impact across the agency, just an administrative change, if you will. We have looked throughout our budget, like my colleagues, to find places where we can trim and not only trim, but make up for the lost ground due to inflation. And so mostly what you see there is some cuts that result in let's see if we go 4 lines up from the bottom on the non-personnel cost totals, a negative 3% or 3% savings in our non-personnel spending projection for the next 2 fiscal years. The overall department budget, of course, is being still driven by some of the increases in labor and benefits that you've been advised of already, for an increase of overall 10%. If we just did an apples-to-apples comparison and didn't account for that transfer, like held things steady state, it would be a 5% increase to the public affairs budget. So with that, I will conclude and turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you so much, Mike. We have a question from Director Leahy.
Thank you. I've asked about this a couple different years. I know in 2023, when we were looking at our memberships and sponsorships, I'd asked that they be decreased. In 2024, they actually increased. Reminder to everyone on the board, we're spending over $550,000 a year on memberships to organizations in San Diego, in the state, in other states, and other regions. And I would assume also we might be attending meetings in those areas. So I would ask our general manager and our chief operating officer that actually get reduced. Preferably, I would like to see that at a max of, I'm going to say $100,000, which I'm sure is going to be a nice little gasp there. And even then, I think that's a lot. But I think we need to start looking at where we need to focus our efforts and not be just throwing money at every organization that exists. I do understand that there are benefits to some of those. And I, again, appreciate at least removing the Oceanside one that I had requested last year, which I think resulted in a savings of $600. So thank you.
Thank you. Director Vespi.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the presentation. Just a question on the increase in direct charges to CIP. Can you talk us through what's driving the nearly triple?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Director. It is a big increase, and it's directly related to the directly related to the dramatic increase in complexity and effort related to the Southern First Aqueduct outreach. In addition, I think we underestimated in previous years. I think that the number was a little lower than it probably should have been. The number that we were attributing to CIP outreach, that was before my time, so I can't really speak to it, but I think it was a little bit too low, and I believe now it's much more accurate and again reflects the intensity of that effort, which involves the vast majority of time for 2 of my staff people.
In prior years, did actuals vary from budget to reflect the actual activity? Or is this just cleaning up the budget for the go forward for your projected actual activity?
I will have to look backwards and check on that to answer that fairly accurately.
Thank you.
Yes.
Director Norman?
Thank you, Chair. I guess this is the best place for me to ask about the water conservation garden again. I really think it's an important public relations vehicle as well as just a good education thing, which I know people have said is not part of our core mission. But I just want to remind people that that is an excellent program. I think it could be made better if it was got the right kind of focus and support. And when I look at what I thought was our need of contribution and I compare it to some of the other things that are in this budget, I have to say, I think it's really worthy. So there's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Dr. Norman. Director Leahy?
Sorry, one more question that just came up. So there's 2 FTEs are dedicated to the outreach on the aqueduct work that's occurring right now. And then does that mean that, so the other 12 FTEs are doing external outreach like publications, media, et cetera?
I'll clarify that for understanding here and make sure that I frame this correctly. The majority, and indeed vast majority, of 2 people's times in my department are attributed and working on CIP outreach broadly. Right now, that happens to be mostly Southern First Aqueduct, but there are other things. There's many, we start work in pre-construction to look for problems, potential problems, and reduce them ahead of time. So that is correct with that caveat, and the other people are doing the other things that I described here and others that didn't make the cut for this presentation.
Okay. And just a question maybe for finance staff. Normally you can capitalize staff time that are attributed to engineering projects, but are we able to capitalize outreach efforts if they're budgeted to capital projects? Are we capitalizing that?
Yes. And we did an extensive study several years ago to make sure, and we do it from time to time to make sure that we're properly associating the right capitalized overhead. And we did that study, and we're happy to share that if you want to see that.
I was just asking if we were able to, or if
Yes,
we
yes,
had to
we
have
are.
the
Yes, we are.
delineation.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Director Leahy, and thank you so much, Mike. There's no other questions. We have 2 more presentations before we let you go for lunch and give you your time back. Feel free to stretch. I know it's been a minute. Staff, feel free to get up and stretch as well, but we'll continue on with the presentations. Don't go far if you're stretching. Jeff, we'll go with a water resources presentation right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be quick. For water resources, we are a medium-sized department, 24 FTEs. We work closely with engineering, operations, and imported water on a daily basis. Department overview, we're really responsible for preparing the Urban Water Management Plan, Water Facilities Master Plan, Climate Action Plan, lots of planning efforts happening in water resources. But we also administer other things, including the water purchase agreement for the desal plant, as well as the PSAR program, the Permanent Special Agricultural Water Rate Program. We're broken into 4 divisions. We have our Supply Planning and Water Policy Division that looks at long-range water supply and drought planning. Our Environmental and Facilities Planning that ensures environmental regulatory compliance, as well as the Facilities Master Plan, which was adopted just recently. We have a Regulatory Policy and Support Division that looks at regulatory advocacy at the state, including working with the State Water Board, the EPA, and other state agencies. And then we have a Grants Program Administration Division, and that was included in yesterday's presentation regarding grants. For accomplishments, We completed the facilities master plan. We've started development of the 2025 urban water management plan. Also, you know about the $19.4 million grant for the intakes at the desal plant. And we include preparing an annual water supply demand assessment that's due to the state every year. Looking at initiatives for the upcoming two-year budget, we plan to complete the 2025 urban water management plan and water shortage contingency plan, continue to ensure regulatory compliance on all of the water authority's projects, administer the RWM program grant funding, which I talked about yesterday, and just to respond to Director Freehoff's question as far as RWM funding, how much is coming back to the water authority. There's two pieces to that. We have two projects we were awarded for about $1.6 million, and then about $800,000 to cover our staff time. So about $2.4 million in RWM funding is coming back to the water authority for projects.
Great, thank you, Jeff. If I could, what are the two projects?
They're both related to turf replacement projects related to the state regulations to support the member agencies, and then also direct toilet installation program for disadvantaged communities.
Okay, so these are funds, though, that are going out to the member agencies.
They'll be made available region-wide to agencies that want those projects in their service area. So agencies can say, we don't want those, or we do want to participate.
Okay, but nothing to help with our CIP or anything like that. It's more the conservation programs.
Right. The RWM funding typically for that sort of thing, although there can be some wastewater project options that are in there if an agency would apply, but it's nothing the water authority is administering as far as wastewater, other things like that, stormwater. That's done through the RWM group, but not administered by the water authority.
Right. So again, the funding's not specifically coming to offset our budget, but it's going out to help our member agencies.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. Other initiatives for the new budget is to form a new grants group to identify and pursue grants. We're taking existing staff. Typically, Water Resources administered the RWM and the MAP funding. There are other grant activities in the agency. We're going to try to consolidate those in Water Resources. It will be the hub to support other grants like from the Bureau of Reclamation that say engineering or operations go for. We'll support their efforts to do that because we have the in-house expertise to do that. We also are looking at actively marketing our excess San Miguel Conservation Bank credits. That's something that's out there and it's passively available. We have some credits to sell, so we're going to go out and let people know that those are available. And then finally, continue to support the member agencies as they comply with the state water use efficiency regulations. Modifications for the 26-27 budget. We're eliminating one FTE that was a position that was unneeded related to environmental work. And the CIP prioritization position would be the one FTE from Water Resources repurposed for that CIP use. In terms of non-personnel changes, we've reduced our expenses compared to our current adopted budget by about $1 million. And we did that through an increase of in-house services, doing it ourselves, receiving external funding to offset operating costs, and then we've eliminated projects that weren't necessary. For FY 26 and 27, looks like our budget is about $98,000, which is a 5% increase compared to our amended budget. That's on non-personnel, and that's primarily due to shifting operational support for the Carlsbad desal plant from the CIP budget to the operating. The reason is we've finished the desal intake, so CIP, there's no longer construction, so that will move to operating. And then we have a membership with CW3E and Scripps, and we're going to move that from Public Affairs to Water Resources. So in summary, we're looking at about, for labor and benefits, about a 17% increase, and then for non-personnel, a 5% increase, and that concludes my presentation.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Are there any questions from directors? Director Roback?
So I just want to make a statement. I think the investment in CWE through Scripps is a wise investment for the Water Authority. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, we will move to the next presentation with rates and charges. Is Pierce here?
Yes, he's on his way. He just needed a quick break.
Okay. Folks, use this time to just stretch right now. Yes, there is one item, equipment replacement fund, but we will be moving it to the main meeting. All right, stretch time is over. Pierce is in the house. You snooze, you lose. All right, Pierce, take it away. Last presentation.
All right, I'll try to make this quick. I just scarfed down a bite of eat, and I know energy is important, so let's go. Today's rate presentation, it's just another bite at the apple as you've gone through the full budget workshop now, understanding what inputs, what levers the board may pull as you provide direction to staff and the general manager's office in terms of where we go from here. As we talked about last week, it's really that we're still in this revenue requirement phase. We're looking at what the cost inputs are. We're not really focusing on the functional allocation. We're not worrying about the rates and charges. That is staying relatively static as the conversation in terms of the cost of service reports. Those items are generally staying status quo in terms also of the member agency allocations. So that's where we are in the rate setting process right now. Last week I shared the drivers of the baseline increase. We have pressures from water purchases and treatment. So we've got inflationary increases on our QSA supplies and desal. We have the MWD rate adjustments that are about a 3.5% rate impact. We have kind of the balancing act of some of our storage and contractual obligations. That's about a 2.5% impact. So that is all kind of supply components that are driving or pressuring rates for calendar 26. We have a new debt issue to fund the capital infrastructure, the asset management program that was talked about yesterday. That's a $285 million issuance, and that's about a 2.5% effective rate impact to fund those projects that are going to be funded with debt. The operating department or the operating budget, that's about a 1% increase with what is reflected currently. So if there are changes, that number can move up or down. And then also this final piece of board policy or board discretion. There are opportunities for this board to move the needle up and down in terms of specific levers to pull, maintaining policies, suspending policies, and I'll get into that in a moment here. A biggest driver of rates and charges aside from the costs is the denominator. How much water are we forecasted to sell? You saw the presentation yesterday from Savani that talked about the member agency survey. The member agency survey based on the February numbers, so the most recent information we have from that survey was 327,000 acre feet for calendar 26. When I presented the high-low forecast last week, the guardrails, if you will, the range was a plus minus 5% from that survey. So you could see that demands had, plus 2, minus 2% rate impact more or less on the forecast with a plus or minus change in sales. Some context here, last 2 years have been challenging for the Water Authority. 2023 was basically our lowest ever, but really in the last 30 years. And it was also a unique year. We had a wet year, we had a cool summer, and we had a hurricane in August. And so August is typically a very high sales month. It's when things are warming up, when irrigation is happening. We got dumped on a couple inches of rain, and that really put a damper on sales. So the low for 270,000 acre feet was 2023. If we just look back at the last 5 years, and this is with Rainbow and Fallbrook removed, our average for the last 5 years, even with the 2 wet years that we've had, the average is 336,000 acre feet. There was a proposal, a letter that we received from Director Vespi from the City of San Diego that had a request for a different approach to water sales. So rather than relying on the member agency survey, there was a proposal that was to use a different number, and it was kind of the lesser of, and it's up on the screen, the lesser of 90% of the lowest of the 5-year forecast, or 272,000 acre feet. When we take a look at that member agency survey and we pull from the 5-year forecast, the lowest year is 28, 29, once local supply projects are on, you take 10% off of that number and you get to the 243. So that's the lesser of those two options. And along with the letter was to adjust the budget and the rates accordingly. We haven't run the budget numbers, but I've worked with the budget team and the rates team to look at what this option is in terms of an alternative for rates and charges. Before we get there, the sales survey, we showed this before, the number is volatile. And there is some discretion from the board that the number doesn't have to be what the member agencies survey showed. The member agency survey from last April, as we shared last week, was 314,000 acre feet for 26. The November survey came back and said 300,000 acre feet. The recent February survey bumped that number up to 327,000 acre feet. So you see that the numbers are moving a little bit here and there, but generally they're on that same approach. The letter that we received would have that 243,000 acre foot number based on, again, looking at the 5-year and then chopping 10% off, so the lesser of those numbers. When we just look at the member agency survey, that shows a build over that time horizon of about 175,000 acre feet of water. So as Director Freehoff mentioned, as the priority of the board, there is a strong focus and a prioritization of looking at how we can address those assets and use them to our advantage should we not roll into drought over the next couple of years. I have a couple different rate scenarios here just to help guide the conversation as we look to provide a rate recommendation in May. We will look to have the full cost of service report with the draft recommended rates as part of the board packet in May. So that's what we're looking for here. The starting point is the baseline. So this is what was shared with the board last week. It maintains the board's policies, the financial policies, everything that we've done. As Dan mentioned, we're not trying to get ahead of the board here. You know, there's a lot of conversation that's going on, but until there's concrete direction, we want to just provide that baseline as such. It has a $285 million issue. And that is just a normal debt issuance in terms of what we can fund. The second option here is to give the board one lever of potentially, rather than doing a normal debt issue, where it's principal and interest over the full 30 years, you could capitalize interest. Typically what that means is for 3 years, you pay interest only, and then you push 30 years of principal into the back 27 years of that. That allows us to maintain lower rates, lower revenue requirements in the first year, 2 or 3, and we can provide that immediate rate relief. So we could go from a 12% adjustment to an 11% adjustment with that one change. We can also go the other way. We've heard some comments in terms of whether it's the commercial paper program or just an overall desire to lower debt service in general. So we could start paying more principal down. In order to pay more principal down, we need higher revenue requirements, so we need to raise rates in order to cover that expense. And so you can see we can go up 1 or 2% here to 14%. The low sales alternative, as I mentioned last week, sales really has a big, high sensitivity to the rate adjustment. So if we were to use this 243,000 acre foot number, we would look to see about a 30% rate adjustment that would be necessary in order to cover those costs. That's really just because at the end of the day, we have those costs that we need to recover, and you're just squeezing the same amount of cost or less cost over far fewer units of water. There are some cost of service concerns. We've reached out to our cost of service consultant. I had some concerns initially. I had some good conversations with them. And yes, while there is discretion for the board to move off kind of what is being communicated from us from the member agencies, If you move too far afield, there are concerns with cost of service in that you might be setting rates at 200 some odd thousand acre feet and actually selling that 327 or even 310,000 acre feet. The categories that are paying that volumetric difference may not have the same cost benefit when you start paying down debt service. So supply, for example, has very little debt associated with it. So if you do over collect and you start paying down debt, that's going to benefit the transportation system, that's going to benefit the storage system, and not necessarily the payers, the users of that storage with the higher rate. Talked about the scenarios that maintain existing board policies. We are happy to continue the conversation on changing board policies, just if that direction could be provided ahead of the May board meeting so we can run those analyses. I think Chair Abdullahi mentioned for those comments to be received by the end of the week. When we talk about what adjustments, what levers can we talk about, we've had some really good conversations over the last several months since January talking about board policies, financial policies. We can use more reserves. If you simply say rates can't be this, but we don't have a corresponding decrease on the expenditure side, reserves will make up the difference. That can only go so far because we only have so many reserves. But then there's just that kind of question of how much do we rely on those reserves, and what does that do in terms of our days of cash? We also have coverage reductions. That's pretty tricky here in terms of looking at all the numbers and sales, including kind of the volatility that we have in our QSA delivery schedule. So that number is going to be balancing around in any case. And we could always change if there's a desire not to do the $285 million debt issuance. There's always a desire to PAYGO fund that. Rates could be adjusted to reflect that. So we always have, the board always has the discretion to change these numbers. I will advise, though, as we go into that 2026 debt issue, that is something that the long-range financing plan has to address and will be used as really kind of the foundation for the rating agencies to make their opinions. What's not included here is the sales forecast. Again, we're using the member agencies number, but if we go off of that, trying to have a higher confidence level, there were comments yesterday about 327. What if we don't sell 327? The board has the discretion, again, to go down to, say, 320, 315, and just understanding that, there's going to be a little bit of a confidence level in terms of you never know what the weather's going to have. Economic uncertainty, we saw some GDP reports that were lower than expected, and so we don't know what is around the horizon there for tariffs or slowing or even recessions. We talked about the MWD business model update and legal settlement. We only know what we know today. And the third-party water transfers will be, if those are able to occur, those are a significant benefit to this agency. As we saw with the 2 deals that Dan was able to already secure, those will have significant benefits. It just needs time, but we're not counting our chickens before they're hatched. In terms of next steps, we look to receive the cost of service report in May based on currently the baseline recommendation. We'll present that and look for the board to set the public hearing in May for the public hearing in June. Look to have a final report and recommendation at that time and hold the public hearing there. And then no rest for the weary. We go right into our 2026 long-range financing plan that should go through the November timeframe. So with that, that concludes the presentation.
Thank you so much, Pierce. We have a question from Director Leahy, followed by Director Vespi.
Thanks. And a couple things on this. So I know we have our potential 30% increase shown from the supposed modeling of the letter. My concern, and I appreciate that would be today's impact if we were to change the demand projections for the future. My concern is I know that I've been saying it for the 2.5 years I've been on the board. I know there have been people on this board before who are no longer here who have been continuing to say that had we been accurately projecting and acknowledging that our demands are decreasing rather than increasing, which I know we've made that change, that this would have already been incorporated into the rates, and or there would have been years in which this board would have bypassed any rate increase. I know there were years where we did 0% increases because we were assuming demands were going to continue to go up when they continued to fall. So I'm glad that we're making the change in the projection. I think, and I don't want to speak for Director Vespi, but I think that he's taking the conservative approach, which I appreciate, that understanding that Pure Water San Diego is coming, there are going to be decreased demands. We need to make sure, and I think it was Director Kennedy previously was continually asking on a regular basis to see what that did if we modeled that very low number and what that would mean for this organization. If we do have increase in surplus in supply or in demands one year, then maybe that can go and replenish our reserves, and it's not necessarily going and funding debt payments, which is a discrepancy on your cost of service, but then it's allowing us to better smooth the rates and the impacts to our customers. So I appreciate that perspective that the letter did provide. I know the 30% increase looks like a shock, but I think that it is looking at that might be a reality of our actual demands in the future. And we need to make sure that we are projecting that correctly. One of the concerns, again, going back to debt payment, I believe, I kind of did some research after last week, I believe our commercial paper does hit the 30-year mark sooner than we're projecting, so I would ask that staff really goes back and looks at what series has rolled over when. From what I've seen, I think it's going to be actually in about 10 plus years. And not 20 years. And so my question is I think if that does hit sooner, we're going to be expecting a large debt payment sooner than we are showing in our long-term debt models and those colorful graphs. So I'd like to see where those big tranches hit. If that's not the anticipated plan to pay that off, then we need to know that and understand that as well. Because I think that if we're not seeing that's going to have another 30% increase that we can't attribute to Director Vespi, Mr. Orant, and it's going to be something that we just haven't included in the model. And our general manager is not here. I will inform him of the comments afterwards. But going back, 2023, we increased the operating budget by 2%. Even though the prior 2-year budget, we did not spend 10% of that operating budget. 2024, we cut 2%, so the 2% we added to the operating budget we cut last year. We're now showing an increase of 1% to the operating budget, even though we're still underspent by 10%. I would only be supporting an operating budget that shows a cut in that overall budget. Again, if there's spending that we're not doing now, then I would assume that we're not impacting any levels of service to the member agencies, and that the things that we're not spending that money on can be reduced. So that would be what I would support in the future. I wouldn't support anything with an increased operating budget in it. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Leahy. Director Vespi?
Thank you, Chair. First question. Deferring debt principal or capitalizing interest, that results in a higher total cost of capital, correct? Thank you. The answer was over time. The 30% rate increase based on our budget letter assumes only changing the suggested sales forecast. Is that correct?
No, it also makes where specific direction was provided for cost savings, those cuts, that revenue requirement was eliminated from the rates. So like the memberships, that was reduced.
In that 30%?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What about the other suggestions in our letter? Deviating from board policies, analyzing the structural improvements that could be made in the organization's finances through lowering our leverage levels. Were those types of things brought into focus in that 30% rate increase? And the reason I want to ask that is because the intended primary purpose of the letter and the suggestion around conservative assumptions was not next year, right? It wasn't to have another 3 red X's on the screen. Okay, the focus was projecting more conservatively over time with the goal of improving the structural financial position of this public agency. And I think all of us are want to strive towards that, but that's not so much reflected in all of this. Also, I'd like to note that the 26-27 draft budget that's in front of us for review today assumed 288,000 acre feet of sales, right? Yes. So
that might have been on a fiscal year basis, but
okay, yeah. So for fiscal 26, so the change to 327 is about equal to the change. That's actually probably less than the change to going down to 243, right? So that my point is that variance of going from the 288 that's in the budget to where we are today at 327, that cut the proposed rate increase from 24% to 12%, right? These deviations that we've put into our letter, they're not out of line with what you guys have put forward in your assumptions. So the 30% spike or that increase to 30%, I think it's a reality that we all as member agencies and members of this board need to be ready for, right? We had some rain, or sorry, we didn't have rain this year. That's going to probably drive this board adopting a lower rate increase from one year to the next. My concern is we're going to be back in the same position next year when it does rain, and we're going to be staring at 30%. I don't see the structural changes. That's all we really want to see. We want to see conservative projections. Again, phase 2 of Pure Water is coming. It's 10 years out. We know it's coming. I just would like us all to plan for that appropriately.
Absolutely,
that's all
Director
the goal.
Vespi. That's why we ran the analysis, and so that's staff job is to take input, run the analysis, and that's what Pierce is showing today. And it's up to the board's discretion to move forward on which projection you want to proceed with.
Okay. I guess in conclusion, we're obviously living on very thin margins, right? Given where we are in relation to the take or pay line. Planning conservatively at this point doesn't seem unreasonable to me, and likely would contribute to smooth and predictable rates in the future. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Vespi. Director Arant?
So we're going to need some help from the communications department explaining to my customers why, because we think the water sales are going to drop down to 240,000 acre feet, that we're going to raise your rates 30%. And oh, by the way, if we do sell 288 or 300 or 310, we're going to make a lot more money. Of your money, we'll have it in our bank account. I guess your perspective is how much water you buy from the water authority. If you're an agency that's looking to roll off in the future, don't have as much at stake as, say, an agency like mine that buys 100% of its water from the water authority. So as we're dismantling the water authority's financial structure, let's be careful, because we're accountable to the ratepayers out there. And to me, we can say 30% increase. Yeah, we can absorb that. The issue we're not talking about, and it's an issue that some of our member agencies refuse to talk about, is the basic financial revenue structure of the water authority. As long as we're based on commodity sales, we will have these variability in revenues. What we need to do is to move, and I've advocated this since 2019, is we need to move to truly fixed charges where member agencies make a contribution to the water authority based on the legacy value of the water authority to each community. Yes, does that mean a higher IAC or a one-time charge, an annual charge? As long as we ignore that and people roll off and do something else, the water authority will continue to diminish in its financial stability because of declining water sales. And so I say we need to honestly look at the revenue structure, the basic structure of the water authority. You can't be in the business just selling water anymore. You have to have fixed revenues, truly fixed revenues, not revenues that shift around as one member agency rolls off and shifts costs to other member agencies. We need to have truly fixed revenues. Thanks.
And the conversations around the structure continues. We have a quick comment from Tish.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify that staff had originally put forward in previous documents and information to this board an 18% increase. That was part of the 3-year roadmap that was provided to the board. And so the change was from 18 to 12 based on updated information provided by the member agencies. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question from Director Freehoff.
Thank you. I have a quick question. At our meeting, I think it was maybe at the board meeting last week, we had a graph that showed a range. Is that a high and a low? So the high-low is just based on demands, that plus or minus 5%?
Yeah, so the plus or minus, I'd say the bulk of the adjustment was plus or minus 5% of sales. There were slight adjustments on the high mark for inflation. So just a higher inflationary environment, slower growth.
Okay. And then my question with the low ramp, the one that's 5% less, when you provided that scenario, does that assume that the current budget? Or would other changes have to be made?
Yes, so last week's roadmap reflected the budget that was presented in front of you today at the workshop.
Okay, so are we saying we could achieve this budget with an 8%? Do you see where I'm going with that?
Yes. So just to clarify, so the reason why that the lower bar of the low end of the high-low, that was achieved by taking the 327,000 acre feet and adding 5% to it, so that sales would increase by 5% from the member agency number. So the sales volatility.
Oh, it was just based on. Okay.
Right. So the plus
I
or minus
understand.
5% on the orange pink bars from
Right.
the Feb 25 survey. That's what reflected the kind of low bar or the high bar. So high sales, low rate; low sales, high rate.
Right. I'm sorry, I got them backwards. But now now I understand. All right. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Director Freehoff, and thank you all the directors who were engaged. There are no more questions, no more speakers on the queue, but I'm sure folks are still marinating on a lot of what was discussed in today's workshop. Thank you all, staff as well as directors, for pushing through for an extra hour and 15 minutes. We are going to go ahead and adjourn this meeting. There's no further business, and keep in mind to make sure that you bring any, please provide staff with any specific directions of additional comments or suggestions no later than the end of this week. Thank you for your engagement, and I believe lunch is available. No? No lunch?
Yes,
Okay.
lunch is available.
Lunch is available. So thank you all for hanging in there. Have a great day and see you in May.